we have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 3 hours I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter all over the country. Plenty coming up today. We'll be discussing philanthropy. Is it the way forward, and what are the potential pitfalls? Plus, a brand new blockbuster from the great Ken Follett. He and his wife Barbara, a former Labour MP, join me live a little later. But first, with all of the news, it's Amelia Harper.
I'm Amelia Harper. This is your news at 12 o'clock. The Health Secretary is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get their coronavirus booster jab to help avoid COVID restrictions over Christmas. Sajid Javid says young people can play their part by persuading their parents and grandparents to get the vaccine. So far, almost 10 million people have received a top-up jab. But in England, around 30% of over 80s and 40% of over 50s are yet to receive it. From tomorrow, 3 million more people are being invited in England to have their booster. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. The Labour leader has called Boris Johnson's handling of the Paterson case corrupt. The Sun on Sunday's political editor David Wooding has told GB News he thinks this won't affect Boris Johnson's popularity.
Still sails on ahead, partly down to the fact that Sir Keir Starmer isn't cutting through as well as he would like, but also because Boris Johnson seems to have a bit of a Teflon finish, and people factor in that Boris is Boris, and they like him and they vote for him on the basis of he's an attractive politician for some reason. He has an X factor, and whatever mud is thrown at him doesn't seem to stick.
The US is reopening its borders to UK visitors who are fully vaccinated against COVID tomorrow. The country has been closed since early 2020 due to the pandemic. Travellers from Ireland and the 26 Schengen nations in Europe, China, India and South Africa are among those also allowed in on Monday. Travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin has told GB News this is a huge boost for the UK travel sector.
The fact that the USA is open is a step towards the world unlocking. I mean, obviously, it affects many citizens from other countries who are fully vaccinated, who can also enter the USA. But the UK accounts for the most arrivals into the United States every year. Before the pandemic, it was 4.8 million. We are their top market.
Now, there are some flashing images in this next story. At least 2 investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at his Astro World's music festival in Houston on Friday. He was on stage when the crowd surged forward, which police are calling a mass casualty incident.
My fans really mean the world to me, and I always just really want to leave them with a positive experience. And anytime I can make out, anything that's going on, I stop the show and, help them get the help they need, I could just never imagine the severity of the situation.
At least 19 people have been killed in a road accident near Mexico City. A truck lost control and crashed at toll booths on the Mexico-Puebla highway in Ixtalapuca. 6 nearby vehicles were dragged along and 3 other people were also injured. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has condemned an assassination attempt on Iraq's Prime Minister and supports his call for calm and restraint. Security has been increased in Baghdad's Green Zone after Mustafa al-Kadhimi was targeted by an armed drone. The area houses government buildings and foreign embassies. The attack comes amid tensions sparked by Iran-backed militias who are refusing to accept last month's parliamentary election results. National trust organisations worldwide are calling for a ban on the use of peat in compost as part of efforts to tackle climate change. The charity says healthy peatlands act as carbon sinks, which absorb carbon from the atmosphere. They help control flooding, reduce the impact of climate change and provide a home for wildlife. The National Trust Director General, Hilary McGrady, says the government must step up and play their part. Tributes are being paid to UB40's founding member Astro, who has died following a short illness. The 64-year-old, whose real name's Terence Wilson, was a vocalist for the band which originally formed in 1978 in Birmingham. The group sold more than 70 million records and produced hits Red Red Wine, Falling in Love with You and Rat in My Kitchen. You're right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Thanks, Amelia. Coming up this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, as billionaires pledge to bail out the COP26 ambitions, a Vietnamese airline buys an Oxford college, and Mosley money finds its way into the Dreaming Spires too. So, is philanthropy the way forward, and what are the pitfalls? As the Tories turn on themselves over sleaze and leadership, how much trouble is Boris Johnson in? Plus, assuming you want to live longer, given the state of the world and the country, how might you do it? Sir Michael Caine says war rations and a lack of sugar are the reason for his good health, but is he right? Now, last week, billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates offered big bucks at COP26 to help poorer countries go green. Also, Vietnam's richest businesswoman gave £155 million from her budget airline to Linacre College, Oxford, who are now asking the Privy Council to change their name to Tau College, Oxford. Well, this morning's newspapers are also analysing the row over donations to Oxford University and some of its other colleges from the Alexander Mosley Trust, established by the former F1 boss Max Mosley, whose father was, of course, Sir Oswald Mosley, the leader of Britain's pre-war fascists. Now, some context. In the old days, great seats of learning here would have been founded by the royals or church leaders. For example, Bishop William Wickham, a hugely wealthy landowner and cleric, founded Winchester College and New College, Oxford. Later, Henry VIII, not to be outdone, founded both Christ College, Oxford and Trinity College, Cambridge. Centuries later, in the wake of the Industrial Revolution and in the modern era, successful businesses and wealthy men and women took up the reins. For example, my own Bristol University was founded by W.D. and H.O. Wills, who made a mint from tobacco. At the other end of the health spectrum, Boots the chemists put lots of cash into Nottingham University. And the Roots Motor Company, subsequently bought by the giant American Chrysler Company, but in the old days they used to make Hillman and Sunbeam, they helped get the great Warwick University up and running. And even more recently, when James Dyson complained to the university's Minister Joe Johnson that he couldn't get enough engineering graduates because the UK universities simply weren't producing enough, Joe Johnson said, well, why don't you set up your own? Dyson did, and it's all going very well, thank you. Now, for Dyson, there was a specific need, but other wealthy types around the world just see it as the right thing to do, to pump money into the needs of their workforces and society at large. Going back a bit, the Cadbury family, the Peabodys, the Gettys, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, to name but a few, were all at it. Nowadays, the same applies to the Bezoses and the Gates of this world. What's more, they're happier to fund worldwide healthcare projects and efforts to save the planet through their own agency and on their own terms, rather than doing it via taxation, with governments, some less competent than others, as the intermediaries. But as for the Moseley money and Oxford University, it also raises the issue of motivation and hypocrisy. The wealth of Cecil Rhodes helped fund overseas students at Oxford, but his statue became a target of hatred because of his colonial and racist past. But money bearing the name Moseley, which has far worse and more recent political connotations, seems okay. All a bit odd. The columnist Zoe Strimple writes in today's Sunday Telegraph that the undergraduates of Linacre, shortly to be Tow College, will probably be more grateful for the education that they enjoy at Oxford than be worrying about where the money that made it possible came from. But on that, a caution. There are real concerns about Chinese businesses buying their way into our schools and indeed our universities. Businesses that have clear interests in IT, artificial intelligence and communications. So, caveat emptor, buyer beware, some might say. Now, to me, the idea that folk who've made a fortune should want to fund universities, schools, housing projects, any other of the public goods is just great. What's more, these people are more willing to part with some of their wealth through direct and specific projects than they are to pour taxes into an immediate pool of public spending. But do we need to be alert and with eyes wide open on where all of that money now comes from and whether indeed the motivations of rich individuals and rich nations might now be? That is my big question today. Is philanthropy the way forward? And are there pitfalls? I have some great guests coming up and I'll be giving you my take at 2 o'clock. But I also want to hear your thoughts. Email me at gbnews@gbviews.uk, tweet or go to Facebook or to TikTok. And we can start at the pounding heart of it all with Andrew Wigley. He's the founder of universityphilanthropy.com. It's a platform that provides research looking at giving trends to universities. Andrew, good of you to join us. Let me start first of all with, as it were, the headline-grabbing bit, the hypocrisy, it seems to me, over Cecil Rhodes and Oswald Moseley. Who does the due diligence and who says, Rhodes, yes, then, but no statue, Moseley, yes, and yes?
Yeah, and look, I mean, you've summed that up brilliantly. I mean, this is a very thorny topic, right? I mean, the whole area it has its pitfalls, and how you navigate it is very challenging. And the university, of course, would have had its systems in place to have worked out, well, do we accept this money or do we not? But there does feel like there's something a bit off about it, right? I mean, whether it's Madam Tow's 155 million coming into to Linacre, or whether it's the Moseley chair. I think it's this. If you or I put a fiver into a donation box, we don't expect very much from it. It's, a thank you would be nice, but it's done as an act of altruism. The problem is when University of Oxford goes out fundraising, it's looking for money, and there are clearly conditions which then are expected or are allowed to come with that donation. And in the case of Madam Tow, Oxford would deny this, of course, but they would have had a shopping list when they were starting to identify prospective donors who may make very big donations to the university. And one of those might well have been, we'll rename the university in your honour. And that, it seems to have made a big appeal to Madam Tow, and so it is. £155 million later, Linacre College is being renamed. The same with the Max Moseley gift. The chair, the Moseley chair in physics, well, it feels like there's a transaction here, doesn't it? It doesn't feel like it's necessarily an act of altruism, because they are going to have to name the chair in the honour of the Mosley family. Now, personally, universities have been at this for a long time, and I don't necessarily see a big problem about selling the assets, if you like, the names to different things. Where I think it is a bit more disappointing is the name. Is on the side of the donor. I mean, if you really are interested in making a contribution and a selfless act of philanthropy, you wouldn't necessarily be looking to get some sort of name recognition out of it. And moreover, would £6 million be the best investment in physics at Oxford University? Or could you make a big contribution to the University of Stafford, for example, where you can equally study physics, where the Mosley family have a long family association with the county, and where £6 million would have a very big impact on that university's physics department. So I think for a number of reasons, I understand why Oxford do this. They've got their shopping list, they go out looking for funding, and they go out looking for different ways to bring money in. They're alert to the risks, but they make the judgment on balance that it's better to rename the Linacre College the Tower College, so that they can get that £155 million. But the disappointment, in a way, is in the name of the philanthropists. There are many philanthropists who give, and they don't expect to get name recognition in return. And I think those are the people we should be celebrating, and not necessarily the Mosley families or the Madame Taos of this world.
I mentioned in my introduction the Chinese as well, and that seems to me to absolutely cross a line, both in your sector, the universities, but also in some of our great private schools, where they are quite clearly buying into those schools, and they're buying into our universities, and they do have an agenda. We know that from Huawei, we know that from their international policy. The Privy Council has to say yes or no to a college changing its name. Should not the Privy Council or some other such agency also have the right to say, you're not having that money because it's dodgy, tainted, and it comes with a really bleak purpose?
Well, and certainly what this is showing is that there are issues of governance, not only at the university level, but also in the national interest level. And I think when it comes to looking at where the funding comes from, whether it's Vietnam or China, and what do we know about Madame Tao's background? I mean, I haven't been able to find a lot about that, other than that she is apparently a self-made person who set up an airline in Vietnam. But has that really been sort of explored? What do we know about any family that thrives and makes a lot of money in a communist society like Vietnam? It begs questions, doesn't it? Now, I think, yes, the Privy Council has to do its own due diligence. It cannot just accept the word of Oxford, perhaps, on this occasion, because it opens up so many different, I think, questions about where does influence come in. Clearly, a £155 million gift now is the going rate for at least changing the name of an Oxford college, and we have to take the view, don't we, of whether that's in the national interest or not. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate consideration that the Privy Council should be taking.
Okay. Final question on the national interest, and I feel very strongly about this, as folk will hear at 2 o'clock, but I hinted at it in my introduction. It is a way forward if it's done properly. If your aim is to have a low-tax, small-state economy, still with good higher education and great universities, is to say to the great and the good, yes, you can fund higher education, yes, you'll get a big tax rebate for doing it, but don't tell us what to teach. That's a very simple equation that everybody should say hurrah to, isn't it?
Well, I think it is. And I think there are some examples where we wouldn't have made the progress had it not been left to the single-minded focus of some philanthropists. Now, let's take the £600 gorilla in the room. Bill Gates has funded enormous sums of money into malaria research. And guess what? Last month, after 20 years of sort of investment, if you like, in this, we've come up with, or they have come up with, a vaccine for malaria. Now, that's a massive breakthrough. It will save millions of lives. Would that have happened had you left it to a government or to a collection of governments to achieve that? And I think probably not, because A, he had both the drive, he had the deep pockets to be able to do it, and also, he had the single-mindedness, if you like. Governments, as we know, come and go, even in the same political parties. You have politicians who will replace, their predecessor, and they'll have a different agenda. So it's very difficult to get the same level of focused investment in the way that on occasions, entrepreneurs and philanthropists like Bill Gates can do that. Another example, if I may say, a homegrown philanthropist we should be very proud of. So Chris Hone, very low-profile British hedge fund manager. Hedge fund managers often get the rap, often not considered very well. This one has ploughed £2 billion into various areas of child health research. Now, one of the projects that he focused on was in Zimbabwe. He wanted to eliminate, or to at least try and bring down, the risk of HIV transmission between mums and their newborns. And he targeted across Zimbabwe, mums or women of childbearing age to ensure that they were all on antiretroviral drugs. If they're on an antiretroviral drug, they're less likely to be able to transfer the disease to their newborn. And they reckon, and this is an independent sort of analysis that's been done on this, that they reckon that around 40,000 lives were saved by this very focused investment of about £50 million. That's all it cost. I mean, a lot of money, but in terms of the health benefits of it, it was about £50 million. Very significant return on that investment. Now, had you left it to the government of Zimbabwe, would that have happened? And my guess is no, it would not have happened. The investment would have been dispersed, gone elsewhere, or may not have gone into healthcare at all. So that is a homegrown demonstration of where focused philanthropic investment makes a really big impact and can make all the difference to those mums and their newborns in Zimbabwe.
Formed and balanced start to this important conversation. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this Sunday afternoon. That's Andrew Wigley, the founder of Philanthropy.com. Eyes wide open. Yes, take the money, but check it, check it, check it, and never fail to celebrate the good that can be done by those whose motivation is good. We'll be continuing this conversation about philanthropy throughout the programme. As I said, at 2 o'clock, you'll hear my thoughts on the issue, but I really want to hear what you think as well. Do you suspect these big, rich men and women, or do you think it's all fair enough, or do you think there is a middle ground, as Andrew and I were just saying, there may be somebody like the Privy Council who looks at these donations and just makes sure it isn't coming with a dodgy agenda, but it's all about educating our bright young men and women. Email me your thoughts at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or get in touch on my Twitter or GB News' Twitter. We are also on Instagram and we are on Facebook. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've lots more coming up on today's programme. Corrupt and contemptible. That's how the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has described the Prime Minister after trying to defend the former MP Owen Paterson this week. We'll have the very latest on the sleaze row. But first, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is mainly dry with sunny spells, windy with a few showers in the west. Let's take a look at the details. For the southwest, the afternoon will be a dry one with scattered clouds, some sunny spells in between and a northwesterly breeze. Colder than yesterday with highs of around 12 Celsius. For London and the southeast, a fine and dry afternoon with sunny spells and a breezy northwesterly winds, temperatures peaking at around 12 Celsius. For South Wales, it will be a dry afternoon with sunny spells, as well as some scattered cloud and top temperatures of 11 Celsius. A drier afternoon for Manchester and northwest England, as early showers will have faded away. Staying windy, especially along the coast, but winds continuing to ease through the day, highs of 11 Celsius. A windy and gusty afternoon for northeast England, but remaining fine, dry and largely sunny. Temperatures peaking at around 10 Celsius towards the coast, but feeling cooler than that in the wind. For Glasgow and southern Scotland, a drier afternoon with morning showers having all but died out. Staying rather windy, although the wind will continue to ease as we head towards the evening. A fine afternoon for Northern Ireland with scattered cloud, sunny spells and mostly light winds. Just northeastern areas will remain exposed to this northwesterly breeze. Temperatures peaking at 11 Celsius. Staying dry across much of the UK into this evening, with winds becoming light, turning chilly after dark, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
The fallout from Owen Paterson's resignation and the subsequent row about sleaze in politics continues today. The Conservative Party's lead has fallen to just 1% in the first full poll conducted entirely after Owen Paterson's resignation on Thursday. The Opinion survey found that the two main parties are almost level pegging on 37 and 36% each. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has seized on the scandal, saying that he doubts Boris Johnson will be able to clean up politics. Sir Keir has also warned making MP Owen Paterson a peer would undermine confidence in Parliament itself. Well, here to offer his views is Trevor Kavanagh, an old friend of mine and the associate editor of the Sun newspaper. Great to see you, Trevor. Thanks for breaking into Sunday afternoon for us. How well, in your view, will Keir Starmer do in capitalising on this situation? Because although Labour are just 1 percentage point behind, Johnson, as the best PM, is still ahead of Starmer.
I think this is one of the most significant findings in all of this, to be honest, Alastair. I think that there's no doubt that the Tories themselves know that they made a terrible blunder here. It looks extremely bad, and indeed is bad, for a whole variety of reasons, and they know that. But what is most astonishing is that the Labour Party, which by now, at this stage in the Parliament, should be well ahead in the polls anyway, is still trailing behind the government. And worse, the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, is something like 13 points behind in terms of being regarded as a future Prime Minister. That's extremely bad for the opposition, and it's not really very good for democracy either.
Totally agree with that last point, Trevor, and we've talked about it many times. I mean, the other thing that struck me as being extraordinary, and you and I go back far enough to know all of these characters and have dealt with them, that Boris Johnson and Owen Paterson and the rest of it has left a wide open goal, and the guy who goes in and does the Cristiano Ronaldo bit is Sir John Major.
Yeah, well, Sir John, I think, actually didn't do himself any favours by his rather venomous attack. And this is a man who is extremely bitter over his own fate as Prime Minister and subsequently over the Brexit vote. And you could tell that the acid was almost dripping as he was on the air talking about Boris. And what he said, I think, has some substance, but I don't think necessarily that a former Prime Minister should be dropping a bucket load over his successor. But I think that Boris will go through a very rough time tomorrow in Parliament and will get a kicking, and he will take it probably with his usual rueful smile. And to be honest, I think that no matter how big this seems at the moment, this will pale into the distance as other events unfold in the coming weeks and months. And I don't think, actually, that this particular event will have any impact on the next election.
Intriguing, because also the other issue for Sir Keir Starmer, who everybody knows is on a mission to de-Corbynise the party, absolutely, and has made some progress on that. And then along comes Angela Rayner and knocks him back. And then we've got a Labour backbencher reported this morning as being on a demo yesterday, chanting that the police are assassins. We've got another, albeit who's now left the Labour Party, but has got a suspended sentence for threatening a lover's girlfriend with an acid attack and what have you. I mean, the baggage that Starmer has to deal with in saying, I am the clean, lovely alternative, is monstrously big.
It is, and you haven't even mentioned Keith Vaz yet. So, I mean, this is a huge backlog of scandals within the Labour Party. They cannot emerge squeaky clean. But what I believe is the case is that the public will have taken these sort of things in their stride in the past. And what we will see is a different focus as time passes, quite quickly, in fact, as the question of the cost of living takes over all other political issues. And that, I think, is going to start quite soon as people's household bills, their mortgages rise, inflation begins to get a grip, and all the things, as you say, we've discussed before. But it's that hip pocket nerve, as they say in America. Once that starts to be wounded, then I think the electorate might turn in an unexpected way. But still, you are left in a position where Keir Starmer is seen as the leader of a hopelessly divided party with no charisma and no leadership qualifications.
The final question, does the Labour Party have the equivalent of men and women in grey suits? I mean, we all know that if things get critically and terminally bad for a Tory leader, the door is knocked, whether it's Ian Duncan Smith or Margaret Thatcher, and is told outright by the powers that be, it's time to go. Labour don't have that mechanism, do they?
No, and they've always been encumbered by the fact that once a leader is in place, nothing can be done to get rid of them, no matter how disastrous they may be. I mean, you only need to look back at Michael Foot. And nothing much has changed since then. Most of the power lies with the National Executive, which is dominated by the Corbynite left. And nobody's going to get rid of Starmer for fear of something worse. Who is there in the running for it? The only person who wants the job is Andy Burnham, and he's not even in the House of Commons.
The final question, on this programme yesterday, I looked at it and said if you had written out the Paterson affair and Johnson's part in it as the plot for a political thriller, it would be rejected by any sensible publisher. And one thing I dropped into that is, of course, that Boris Johnson is still waiting the full and formal report on who paid for the redecoration of the flat in Downing Street and how much the Zach Goldsmith holiday in Marbella cost. That, in your view and given your experience, if both are strictly negative, can Johnson still survive even that?
Absolutely. He's bulletproof, in fact, in many ways. No matter, I mean, he's the cat with 9 lives. In fact, he's one of those blessed with twice as many as anybody else. He, I think, is indestructible until he does something totally unforgivable and inexcusable. As we speak, Boris has that amazing ability to beguile voters with a charming smile and gets away scot-free with things that almost no other politician in this country or elsewhere could have a chance of doing so. So I think that, yes, he will continue, and I think that these two looming verdicts that you're describing will have not the slightest impact on voters who really don't give too much of a toss about what's going on in Chequers, Downing Street, or the wallpaper. It's what happens to their cost of living. It's what happens to the bills that come pouring in. And all of those are going to start taking a toll in the short term.
Always great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for finding time for us this Sunday afternoon. That's Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor and now associate editor of The Sun newspaper. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. Plenty more to come this afternoon. We'll be hearing about the honour that Her Majesty has given to her favourite tipple. But first, a full news roundup from Amelia.
I'm Amelia Harper. Here are the latest headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. The Labour leader has called Boris Johnson's handling of the Paterson case corrupt. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get their coronavirus booster jab to help avoid COVID restrictions over Christmas. So far, almost 10 million people have received a top-up jab, but in England, around 30% of over 80s and 40% of over 50s are yet to receive it. From tomorrow, 3 million more people are being invited in England to have their booster. Now, there are some flashing images in this next story. At least 2 investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at his Astro World Music Festival in Houston on Friday. He was on stage when the crowd surged forward, which police is calling a mass casualty incident. And tributes are being paid to UB40's founding member Astro, who has died following a short illness. The 64-year-old, whose real name is Terence Wilson, was a vocalist for the band, which originally formed in 1978 in Birmingham. The group sold more than 70 million records and produced hits including Red Red Wine, Falling in Love with You and Rat in My Kitchen. You're up to date. I'll be back with more on today's main top stories at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome back. The royal family has been a subject of much discussion and debate in recent times, with genuine concerns about Her Majesty. There was even a report that she was asked to stop drinking on strict doctor's orders recently. Well, Her Majesty, a woman renowned for being a person of her own views, is still clearly very fond of her favourite tipple, Dubonnet. She's just awarded it a royal warrant. There's one for the doctors to ponder. It allows the brand to have an official crest on their bottle, as well as a label that says, "By appointment to Her Majesty the Queen." Joining me now to chat more about this is royal reporter and dear friend of mine, Charles Ray. There he is. First and foremost, did you get my message about this? It's direct from the Royal British Legion. And it's a 100th anniversary one, so thanks for asking. You see, Charlie and I, we talk whether we're on air or whether we're off air. To Her Majesty, I think this is the most brilliant answer from the boss to those who are saying, oh, she's a bit worried about this and she's a bit worried about that. What do you make of it?
No, I quite agree with you. I mean, the Queen is a moderate drinker. She's not like some other members of the royal family, mainly in the past, who like to, have more than one, shall we say. And Dubonnet is one of her favourite drinks. She has 2 parts Dubonnet with 1 part gin, and in 2 ice cubes, very precise, 2 ice cubes, and a slice of lemon. And she enjoys that more than anything. She had the odd martini and red wine with dinner. Now, a few weeks ago, whether it was doctor's orders or she made a decision herself, she decided to cut back because she wants to be in the best possible shape for her Platinum Jubilee next year, in which she's still planning to visit most parts of the country. I know we've had a lot of worry just lately about the Queen's health, but we have to remember she is 95 years old and, she's going to have to take things a little bit easier as it is. And I think this is a sign to the makers of Dubonnet that she's enjoyed their drink over many, many years, and it's about time that they got a royal warrant.
Absolutely right. And talking subtly, as you did there, about members of the family who like perhaps more than 1 or 2, I believe it was her mother.
Yes, it was her mother
as well. I'll tell you a quick story. I don't think I've ever told you. In the ITN days, I was at the Queen Mother's home discussing certain future events and planning. As you know, we all have to do that. And suddenly Lord Hesketh and a chum burst into the room without knocking or anything like that. And everybody looked around and what have you. And the Queen Mother said, tipple time. And it was 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's the Queen Mother. And probably one of the reasons why she lived to such a long life, as we see with other members of the family.
Yeah. Now, a total change of tone, but as I said, there are lots of issues concerning the royal family. And there's an intriguing development which is kind of speculated over. And this is from the Mail on Sunday, but it's a picture that's in an awful lot of the papers. And I'll just do that a little bit, and you might at home be able to catch the fact that the Duke of York is seen riding and wearing a hat, which the Queen Mother doesn't do, but he is smiling. Does he think he's cracked this, Charles?
No, I don't think he does. I think he's smiling, but inside he's grimacing quite a bit, actually, to be perfectly honest. We have to say right from the start, look, he strenuously denies any of these allegations that, are going to be subject to a court case. But he is in for a torrid time over the next few months. He's waiting for a judge, I think it's late December, early November, to rule on his lawyer's application that they should throw out this case by this girl who claims that she was forced to have sex with Andrew, Virginia Guffrey. We have to wait to see if that happens, but it's looking more and more likely that he will have to take the stand via a video link on oath sometime September, October next year, when this case finally comes to court. And there is also a possibility that his ex-wife, who he still lives with, Fergie, may have to give evidence as well to this court. Now, this is going to come in the Queen's Platinum year, which is a little bit spoiling the party, because in the background, you've still got all this Prince Andrew stuff cropping up all the time. And I suspect it's going to keep on drip, 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 feeding all sorts of stuff coming out all the way through. And let's not forget as well, his great friend Ghislaine Maxwell, who is in jail in New York at the moment, is going to stand trial sometime later this month. And I'll be staggered if Prince Andrew's name is not mentioned in that court case.
In that context, Her Majesty will need those gins and Dubonnets.
Yes.
Perhaps a bit more.
Absolutely.
Finish on the Crown, which is making progress still to huge audiences and getting closer and closer to the present day. A story I didn't know about, to be honest with you, until I read it in the papers this morning. I knew that Jemima Khan was a buddy of Diana's in the old days.
Yes.
I didn't know that Jemima Khan had been going out with one of the producers of The Crown and that they've had a big bust-up over how Diana is being portrayed in current and future editions of The Crown. Cracking story.
It is a very good story, and I'm like you. I was unaware of that bust up. You're absolutely quite right in saying that Jemima Khan was a very close friend of Diana's. So much so that obviously she's very upset at the way Diana is going to be portrayed in the future episodes of The Crown. I mean, obviously, Alastair, like you, I'm going to be looking forward. I've loved The Crown so far. I think it's great. And I'm looking forward to this next lot, because obviously it brings it right up into the time when I was really active in royal matters. So I will be looking at it with an experienced eye, but a critical eye as well.
Amazing to think that you were there as the great royal correspondent of the Sun newspaper. But of course, I knew you first.
I did ask. Sorry, Alistair, to interrupt you. I did ask if Robert De Niro could play me, but they said no chance whatsoever.
People always tell me if I ever appeared in anything, it would probably be Dudley Moore, which I think is slightly harsh. But there we go. Charles, always good to see you, and thank you very, very much indeed. Charles Ray there, former royal correspondent, he's just said, of the Sun newspaper, but I first met him years ago when we were both industrial correspondents. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. Lots more coming up on the show this afternoon. What is the secret to living a long, happy and healthy life? After 88-year-old Michael Caine reveals that his health secrets include rationing, we'll be getting some top tips on living well. That after the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is mainly dry with sunny spells, windy with a few showers in the west. Let's take a look at the details. For the southwest, the afternoon will be a dry one with scattered clouds, some sunny spells in between and a northwesterly breeze. Colder than yesterday with highs of around 12 Celsius. For London and the southeast, a fine and dry afternoon with sunny spells and a breezy northwesterly winds, temperatures peaking at around 12 Celsius. For South Wales, it'll be a dry afternoon with sunny spells, as well as some scattered cloud and top temperatures of 11 Celsius. A drier afternoon for Manchester and northwest England, as early showers will have faded away. Staying windy, especially along the coast, but winds continuing to ease through the day, highs of 11 Celsius. A windy and gusty afternoon for northeast England, but remaining fine, dry and largely sunny. Temperatures peaking at around 10 Celsius towards the coast, but feeling cooler than that in the wind. For Glasgow and southern Scotland, a drier afternoon with morning showers having all but died out. Staying rather windy, although the wind will continue to ease as we head towards the evening. A fine afternoon for Northern Ireland with scattered cloud, sunny spells and mostly light winds. Just northeastern areas will remain exposed to this northwesterly breeze. Temperatures peaking at 11 Celsius. Staying dry across much of the UK into this evening, with winds becoming light, turning chilly after dark, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, and thank you very much for so doing. Now, COP26 continues, and electric vehicle drivers from across the UK and Europe made their way to the summit in Glasgow in convoy as part of a huge event called the Electric Road to COP26. They're calling for all sales of new cars and light-duty vans to have a plug by 2030 and to be 100% zero emissions by 2035. En route, they stopped at sites which will be instrumental in the UK government's plan to be net zero. Our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney caught up with them at the British Volt site in Northumberland, where the UK's first gigafactory is to be built.
Electric vehicle drivers passionate about change and determined to make their mark at COP26. And what better way to raise awareness for their cause than a huge convoy visiting leading companies they say are helping combat climate change through their work with electric vehicles and charging. This site was once a coal-fired power station. This area was a big part of the northeast of England's heavy industrial past. But it means the foundations are here to create a UK first. As part of the event, drivers pulled into this massive 93-hectare plot of land to take in the scale of what's underway.
This site in Camas in Northumberland will host the UK's first ever gigafactory. British Volt will make batteries and components for electric vehicles. As motoring journalist and broadcaster Quentin Wilson tells us, the northeast of England is leading the electric revolution.
The northeast is the kind of home of electric cars in the UK. One of the world's most successful electric cars was the Nissan Leaf, made just down the road. And you should be really, really proud of that heritage. And what's happening now with British Volt will mean that this is a real global landmark in the world. You really have done it here.
And the history books will show that the northeast used its industrial heritage to create a sustainable future. The gigafactory will help in the climate change fight, but it will also be a lifeline to the local community.
The North East now is right front and centre in this EV transition, and also the difference that we're going to make here in this part of Northumberland with the jobs and prosperity this will bring. And the Gigafactory is only the start. You know, all the suppliers want to relocate to us as well. We want to build a complete ecosystem that runs right the way from education, right the way through research, development, the factory, manufacturing, low carbon manufacturing, entirely powered by renewable energy, and on into the community and upskilling people. And I really hope that what we do is provide opportunities for youngsters and for people who are already here to learn new skills, come and work for us and make a difference. I left in 1985 after I did my degree because I couldn't get a job, okay? And I don't want people to have to leave the North East because it is the most fantastic part of the world.
I couldn't agree more. A region built on heavy industry, now world leaders in green energy.
Fascinating stuff, absolutely brilliant and so important going forward. The great Rachel Sweeney there with plug-in motors and folk who may hold a useful help to the future. Now, Michael Caine has been hitting the headlines, but this time not for one of his movie star roles. The actor says the secret to being sprightly at 88 years of age is eating no sugar. He also credits food rationing and being evacuated to a farm during the war for his healthy attitude. So, is living a better life as simple as that? And do we even want to extend our lives any further? Somebody who might be able to shed some light on this is life coach Carol Ann Rice from the Real Coaching Company. Carol Ann, great, a big lovely smile to start this Sunday afternoon. Life coaching, one tends to think of sort of thrusting relatively young business executives, male and female, coming to you. But do older people of a certain age, also seek advice and guidance?
Yes, but it's mostly when they've hit a wall, maybe divorce coming up or retirement, and they want to know what to do with the next chapter of their life. So it's kind of like, you know, we all have different life crises. We have one in our 30s when we start to think, oh no, I've got to get a mortgage and maybe get married and have children. Then there's a sort of the traditional midlife crisis. And then later in life, it's like, what shall I do with the next 20 years of my life? So that's when I would come in.
And what about the dietary bit of it, which Michael Caine refers to quite specifically, what he endured, as it were, in the era of rationing, and Joe Lumley's talked about that a little bit as well, and watching out for sugar. Is that part of the general ability to lead a better and more productive and fruitful life?
Well, I think it might be. You see, my mother, like Michael Caine, she was evacuated during the war. She went to live in the countryside, and she said she had the most wonderful food there. And rationing after the war, of course, went on for quite some time. So everyone was limited to how much sugar they could have. People weren't eating so much processed fats. They didn't drink so heavily because alcohol was very expensive. And I don't know if you remember this, Alastair, but a Sunday roast used to last a family quite a few days because you just have like 2 slices of meat. And you had to eke that joint out for the rest of the week. Well, certainly did in my family in the 60s. And I think now the excesses that we have access to, we can have our groceries delivered in 15 minutes. You can have gourmet food delivered 24 hours a day. It's not necessarily good for the heart. It might be good for the soul to have everything you've ever wanted on tap and minutes away. But I think we have a kind of surfeit of excess everywhere. There's a bit too much choice and too much temptation. And even a cup of coffee now isn't a coffee. It's got whipped cream, marshmallows, syrup, sugary syrups in it, and that's 500 calories in a cup. So we've got to watch things. And I think cutting down on sugar, being sensible, and everything in moderation. I quite liked your story about the Queen earlier. A little nip of Dubonnet, a little bit of what you fancy does do you good.
Well, I'll come to that in a moment, but I can't miss that lovely opportunity about my childhood memories. My maternal grandmother, Gertrude Irene, was a kitchen maid in her old days before she married, and she'd do the most brilliant Sunday roast, but she'd always save the dripping which was produced from the roast, because my grandfather, Sidney Ernest, his favourite meal of the day was on Monday or Tuesday with a big doorstep of bread in the dripping. So it not only spread it out, but you know, and the dripping was quite good for him, I think.
It was fantastic. I remember it too. And then was rissoles. My mum would grind up the cooked meat, make rissoles. It just went on and on. That one joint of meat. But now we can go to buffets and load up our plates, and it's not necessarily a good thing. I think the other thing is that Christmas was really special because you'd have a little bit of salmon, a little bit of ham, some special food. But now that's like everywhere. What's special these days? So I think we have to be careful about how much we consume and think, obviously, if you want to live longer, it is in moderation. You can't just have whatever you want whenever you want it.
Also, the economics of it and cutting back on waste is such a brilliant thing. I butted in when you mentioned drink, and I was just talking to the great Charles Ray about Her Majesty giving a warrant to the manufacturers of Dubonnet. There she is, 95, being told by her doctors to look after her health. As Charles said, she's renowned for liking a tipple, but in moderation. In your view, will that have contributed to her longevity?
Absolutely. I mean, we all know what it's like to have a bit too much of a good thing on the next morning. But I think when you deprive yourself, it makes you miserable. That's why we all hate diets. We feel deprived, feel poor me, I'm not having what I want. And as a life coach, my job is to bring happiness, joy and health into people's lives. So a little bit of what you fancy is fantastic. And it lifts the spirits. But I think you need to know when enough is enough. No more than 2 martinis.
Final point, and a quick one because we're coming up to the top of the hour. Exercise in moderation, but as a joy rather than as a burden.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I went for a long walk around the park today. I have got a cold coming. I couldn't go for my run, but I thought, a gorgeous morning, go for a walk, just enjoy it. Had the Archers on for a while. I was joined by the everyday stories of country folk in my ear. Gorgeous day, get out there. But you don't have to say, oh, I've got to run, I've got to do a class. Just at this time of year, it's absolutely glorious for getting out there, and there's no downside for going for a walk in nature. It has its own natural Prozac.
Couldn't agree with you more. As I walked at Hupp Estate alongside the canal outside here in Paddington, it was a joy. Caroline Rice, great to see you. Keep it going, and thank you very much indeed. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. It is exactly 1 o'clock. Plenty more still to come. Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. Thanks for being there if you've been with me since 12 o'clock. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours, I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter all over the country. We've plenty more coming up. Today, we're discussing philanthropy. Is it the way forward, or is it a sign of a flawed system with dodgy types getting their fingers in the till and in our universities? Plus, Ken Follett is back with a brand new thriller. And he and his wife Barbara, former Labour MP, will be joining me here in the studio. But first, a full roundup of the news with Amelia Harper.
I'm Amelia Harper. This is your news at 1 o'clock. The Health Secretary is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get their coronavirus booster jab to help avoid COVID restrictions over Christmas. Sajid Javid says young people can play their part by persuading their parents and grandparents to get the vaccine. So far, almost 10 million people have received a top-up jab. But in England, around 30% of over 80s and 40% of over 50s are yet to receive it. From tomorrow, 3 million more people are being invited in England to have their booster. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. The Labour leader has called Boris Johnson's handling of the Paterson case corrupt. Parliament is due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. Journalist David Semple told GB News that controversies like this rarely have a big impact on the way people vote.
Boris is one of these broad picture politicians. He's not a great administrator at all, but he will probably win the next general election, despite what all the polls are saying now, and he will switch. I don't think he's any more corrupt than any British Prime Minister we've had before. You have to go back to Tony Blair, who I think did a lot more damage to this country. And I think there's a big mess being cleaned up by the Conservatives, some of it their own mess.
The US is reopening its borders to UK visitors who are fully vaccinated against COVID tomorrow. The country has been closed since early 2020 due to the pandemic. Travellers from Ireland and the 26 Schengen nations in Europe, China, India and South Africa are among those also allowed in on Monday. Meherwan Bazorgi, the managing director of Global Travel Experts, has told GB News that holidaymakers are already booking flights.
It's something we've been waiting to hear for a very, very long time, and it's finally happened. So it's all-round excitement. I mean, the whole travel industry as a whole are celebrating this, and we've got customers booked to fly to America as early as tomorrow morning on the first flights.
Now, there are some flashing images in this next story. At least 2 investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at his Astro World Music Festival in Houston on Friday. He was on stage when the crowd surged forward, which police are calling a mass casualty incident.
My fans really mean the world to me, and I always just really want to leave them with a positive experience. And anytime I can make out, anything that's going on, I stop the show and, help them get the help they need, I could just never imagine the severity of the situation.
Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has condemned an assassination attempt on Iraq's Prime Minister and supports his call for calm and restraint. Security has been increased in Baghdad's Green Zone after Mustafa al-Khatimi was targeted by an armed drone. The area houses government buildings and foreign embassies. The attack comes amid tensions sparked by Iran-backed militias who are refusing to accept last month's parliamentary election results. National trust organisations worldwide are calling for a ban on the use of peat in compost as part of efforts to tackle climate change. The charity says healthy peatlands act as carbon sinks, which absorb carbon from the atmosphere. They help control flooding, reduce the impact of climate change and provide a home for wildlife. National Trust Director General Hilary McGrady says the government must step up and play their part. Expedia has stopped selling holidays which involve captive dolphins and whales. The travel firm says they've adjusted their animal welfare policy and attractions and activities with dolphins will no longer be available on their sites. Virgin Holidays made the same decision 2 years ago. Tributes are being paid to UB40's founding member Astro, who has died following a short illness. The 64-year-old, whose real name is Terence Wilson, was a vocalist for the band, which originally formed in 1978 in Birmingham. The group sold more than 70 million records and produced hits Red Red Wine, Falling in Love with You and Rat in My Kitchen. I'll be bringing you more headlines in half an hour. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Thanks, Amelia. Great to hear the fantastic music of UB40 there, albeit for very sad reasons, but they gave and we enjoyed it. I'm Alastair Stewart, and until 3 o'clock I'll be keeping you company along with friends and, I hope, friendly guests. Still to come, in around an hour you'll be hearing my take on our main discussion today. Is philanthropy the way forward, or is it a potentially flawed system? Plus, a truly heartwarming story. A dad from West Yorkshire who adopted 6 children with complex disabilities has been nominated for a national award. We'll be hearing all about it from our Yorkshire reporter, Anna Riley. We'll also be crossing over to Mexico to get the latest on the Mexican Grand Prix, which gets underway this evening. With Valtteri Bottas and his Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton managing a front row lockout, it is going to be one heck of a race, with Max Verstappen sitting there on row 2. Plus, GB News is all about you, our viewers. So any burning questions or stories that you think we need to cover, no matter how big or small, we really do want to hear about them. So get your voice heard by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk and do put Alastair Stewart in the subject line. And you can always tweet us on GB News it's there on Twitter. We're there, Facebook, TikTok, and all the rest of it. Now, as I said there, this afternoon we're discussing philanthropy. The very definition of the practice is the desire to promote the welfare of others, often expressed by the generous donation of money. But like most things in life, it is rarely that simple. Many wealthy people around the world see pumping money into the needs of their workforces, and indeed society at large, as just the right thing to do. Take the Cadbury family, the Peabodys, the Gettys, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, and that's just to name but a few. Well, last week, today's billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates offered huge amounts of money at COP26 to help those poorer countries go green. We also saw Vietnam's richest businesswoman give £155 million from her budget airline to Linacre College, Oxford, who are now asking the Privy Council to change their name to Tow College, Oxford. But this morning's newspapers are also dominated by the row over donations to Oxford University and some of its other colleges from the Alexander Moseley Trust. So, when it comes to philanthropy, do we need to be alert and eyes wide open on where the money comes from and indeed the motivations behind it? Is philanthropy the way forward? Or is it a flawed system? That's my big question today. The programme's called Alastair Stewart and Friends, and I'm delighted to be joined now by a long-standing friend of mine. There he sits, big smile. Sir George Cox. I first met him when he was the Director General of the Institute of Directors. He ran very successful businesses in his own right and also went on to run the Design Council and also set up a charity, which is where I want to start, George, because your Merlin charity, a health charity around the world, is a classic example of a successful man who's made a bob or two doing a good thing. Were the rules fundamentally different when you were running Warwick University and helping establish the brilliant business school there? Different set of rules?
No, I think the situation is similar, Alastair. In today's world, every charity, every university, every research foundation relies in part, or in some cases in whole, on donations.
In your view, is there a philosophical statement in that? Because what I hinted in my introduction is that wealthy folk prefer to do it their way rather than via the government, like James Dyson setting up a new university because he wanted engineers who wanted to work for Dyson. Do the wealthy bring something special to those donations that government taxpayer-funded money can't?
Well, be clear, it's not a question of taxpayer money can't. It's not going to come. It's just not going to come. There's sufficient demands on the taxpayer already. I mean, we look at the healthcare system, we look at health in the community. There's so much demand. This money is not going to come from government. And if you look at, for example, universities, if you're going to compete with the big American universities, like them, the money is going to come from generous donation. And personally, I think it's very good when people have accumulated a lot of wealth that it goes to such good causes and is put to such use.
In your view, and you rub shoulder, I mean, yourself wealthy, but also particularly when you were running the IOD, you rub shoulders.
Don't know about.
Well, relatively speaking, George, but you certainly rub shoulders with a lot of very, very wealthy people, and I've attended conferences with you with some of the richest in the world. In a sense, are they also saying, and I'm going to press you on it because it's a variation of the question I just asked you, do they look at that challenge and say, yeah, the universities that need money aren't going to get it from the government, but not only will I provide that money, but I want to give a little steer, just a little directional hint as to where I'd like that university to go?
Well, whenever an organisation accepts a donation, you have to look at who it's coming from, why they're giving it, and what they expect in return. Let me give you an example, if I can, from Merlin, the humanitarian charity that I used to chair. The more money raised, the more lives saved, the more distress relieved. And we had a situation a few years back where we had a very substantial offer of money on a multi-year basis from a big international corporation. And it was unrestricted, which means you can use it for anything, which is what a charity like Merlin needed, because you can respond quickly without having to seek funds for it. That would seem tremendous. But that organization had a very bad reputation for malpractice in the third world. So you can say the money is being given to us to clean up their name. Okay, on those circumstances, you say, right, morally, we can't touch that. We're not going to be part of whitewashing it. However, that money would have saved lives. Can you look at a child dying of malnutrition or someone dying of a treatable disease and say, we could save you, but you wouldn't like where the money comes from? So you can argue that morally from both points. So even with a strong moral compass, the right answer is not clear.
I was talking to Andrew Wigley, who runs a thing called University Philanthropy, and he said there is a possible middle ground in the same way that the Privy Council will either approve or not approve the changing of the name of Linacre College, Oxford to Tau College because of this Vietnamese donation. I put it to Andrew and he agreed that maybe the Privy Council could also save you at Merlin and elsewhere the worry of having to say, we want the money, but we don't like what they've been up to in another area, that maybe these huge donations should be approved by an independent middle agency.
I think that would be just introducing cumbersome bureaucracy.
Oh.
And I think the boards of most charities, most universities, consider these things very carefully. And you've got to appreciate also that some of them are hostage to fortune anyway. The way it turns out is not what you expect. Reputations change. You know, I was chairing a charity dinner in New York some years ago, and one of the guests there was a certain Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, if she'd have said to me that evening, I have a wealthy financier friend who would be happy to put in, £500,000 to your charity, I'd have bitten her hands off. And I'd have been up here today explaining why we'd accepted Epstein's money. So it's a very complex decision for a university. And many organizations genuinely give philanthropically. But others, are doing it for reputational reasons, to clean up the reputation, to leave their mark on society, leave a monument. And of course, things change, industries change. Obviously, a lot of money came from slavery, which is appalling. But then again, the tobacco companies were great philanthropists, but you couldn't touch tobacco company. You couldn't touch armaments. You can't touch fossil fuel. And so it's a complex decision for a university or a charity to accept large sums of money. And it's always a complex decision. What do they want from it? Now, in the case of that Merlin donation, we turned it down.
Yeah.
And the reason we turned it down was not because, the self-righteous charity trustees were saying, no, we're not going to touch that kind of money. We turned it down for the only reason a charity can turn down a donation under law, which is damage to the organization.
Yes.
The effect on staff who didn't want to be associated with it, and the staff out in the field didn't with the T-shirts on of the organization, didn't want to be associated with the donor. It would have affected recruitment. It might have put other donors off. So on the grounds that it would do more damage than accepting it, we turned it down. And you could argue that's a situation that Oxford might feel that they're in now.
Fascinating chapter.
It's not the morality, it's the damage it will do to the organisation of accepting reputation.
And it's about judgment. Final question, and you and I have talked about this big issue over many years. You're a free enterprise man to your very bones. Do you believe that philanthropy is a key player in trying to get to a lower tax, entrepreneurial, smaller state? Is it part of the way forward to that?
No, I don't think I could argue it as strongly as that. But I do think seeing people who've accumulated wealth putting it to good cause, whether it's Jeff Bezos wanting to take man into space, whether you want people to expand universities, they want to develop sports clubs, they want to do things locally, they want to support their particular charity, they want to do particular research. I think that's a wholly good thing. And it's not substituting for government money. That money is not going to be there anyway. And Alastair, I always felt that it's one of the better parts of the American society, of which I'd criticise many aspects of it, is that when people do well, it is expected to give back. And in America, if you're successful in life, you give back to your school, you give to local community and the like. And I think I'd like to see more of that coming here.
George Cox, great to talk to you again, and thank you very much indeed. You look after yourself and have a wonderful Sunday afternoon. Good to see you. George Cox there, lovely guy, former director of the Institute of Directors and many, many other things. Now, James Drake is the chair of the Future Science Group, a philanthropist who has many different philanthropic initiatives on the go. Were you able to hear what George was saying there?
Yes, I was, indeed. One point I would make to you, Alastair, is that, integrity is my watchword. I would run a mile from anyone who didn't have absolute integrity. I mean, it's the most important thing.
That's exactly what I wanted to pick you up upon, because what I jotted down in my notes, as I do, and I put it to him that maybe a middle agency like the Privy Council or somebody, or the Charities Commission even, should say yes or no to certain monies. What George said there was, no, it's about judgment. The university, the charity, whomsoever it may be, has to make the judgment themselves. And if they don't know, then they're in the wrong business.
Absolutely right. Yeah. It is about judgment, Alastair. Can I just say, to set the scene, we have a number of philanthropic initiatives, the main ones being the Drake Foundation, which is looking at brain health in contact sports players in relation to, head impacts. And secondly, a charity called the Drake Trust, which is helping young musicians. Now, what I do is to integrate those philanthropic initiatives into our science publishing business, because philanthropy requires exactly the same resources, back office resources, as business, marketing, IT, legal, financial, etc. And it works very well. And I think, our young staff appreciate that we're giving something back, because it's mostly to young people. And I would recommend other entrepreneurs like me doing the same thing. I found it very, very fulfilling, and it, as I say, it works extremely well.
Making such donations or offering support to educational institutions, do you seek a quid pro quo? Is there something that you want back that directly reflects the businesses that you are in and that have made your money? Say, yeah, I'll give you X if Y happens.
No, I don't want anything back, Alastair. I'm not one of these people who wants to accumulate wealth over my lifetime. I've got enough. I've simply got enough. And, my last day on earth, I'm not going to say, I wish I'd bought that building in Finchley. I've got enough, and I must now redistribute it. It's what I'm here for, and it will give me joy. And, of course, there are other reasons. There are many other reasons. These things are very complex. My father, who adopted me, Horace Drake, was an extremely good man. He gave all his life to others, and I wanted to repay that, to set something up in his name. So that's why, particularly, I say to you, integrity is my watchword. So these things are quite complex. But can I explain for you a test case here, Alastair? Can I tell you something about the evolution of the Drake Foundation, so you can understand, in a way, how government and how, in fact, the sport itself fits into the picture? Can I do that for you?
No, do.
Yeah, okay. So we started the Drake Foundation in about 2014. And there were a number of things that impelled me to do that. One was that my father was passing away, as I mentioned. Second was that a Premiership rugby side came to my patch in North London. Thirdly, I was very concerned about the potential impact of head impacts, the potential health impact in the long term of head impacts, both in football and in rugby. You saw, Hugo Lloris in 2013, the Tottenham goalkeeper, staying on the pitch with concussion after concussion, a serious concussion. You saw similar things in rugby. And of course, rugby union had gone professional in 1995. Since then, the players were becoming bigger and so on. So I wanted to accumulate some evidence for that. So I then approached a Premiership rugby side and said, let's do a study. Let's do a study on the brain health of the players. And I was amazed that not only the management, but the whole team accepted that and wanted to do that. And this was in two parts. It was looking at compounds in the blood that tell you something about brain health. They're called biomarkers. But it was also about brain imaging. Now, what I was able to do there, you see, was to add value, not just money, because first of all, it was my idea. No one else had done it. The rugby union, the people that run the sport hadn't done it. They should have perhaps. But I was able to add value because Contact Sport knew all about sports medicine. They were the world experts on that. But they knew very, very little about neuroscience research. And from my science publishing background, I was able to connect them, act as a sort of bridge, so that I was able to connect that team to the very good neuroscience department of John Hardy at UCL, and also the department in Imperial College that did the imaging work under Dave Sharp. So anyway, that study then evolved, and it took a lot longer than I would have liked. And this is one of the problems that with science, it takes a lot longer, and it can be incredibly frustrating for impatient people like me.
James,
but this year,
James, let me just butt in because the clock is against us, I fear. But
yes.
I didn't interrupt that because I wanted to hear that logic, and it leads me very nicely to my last question, and it nods back to something that George said. Philanthropy is important. George argued not because it does certain things better than Her Majesty's government might do, but as with your brain imaging and scanning and research, because it does things that the government don't do and wouldn't otherwise get done. Is that your core driver?
Of course it is, Alastair. Of course it is, because only this year, the government has decided to have a committee on the concussion in sport. The conclusion of that committee, one of them was that the sports were marking their own homework. But they've come in much later, and of course, as a result of our studies and of others, then the sport itself is impelled to make the game safer. But in a way, I and others too have catalyzed this whole process. Who else would have picked it up in 2014 and run with it? There were wonderful people like Dawn Astro was there, but she was performing a very different function. So who else would have picked it up? It would have gone for 2 or 3 more years before the game itself would have done these sort of studies.
Absolutely fascinating to talk to you, James, and thank you very much indeed for those thoughts, not only on the philosophical motivation of using wealth to a purpose, but filling gaps that need filling that otherwise might not be. Grateful for your time this Sunday afternoon. That's James Drake, chairman of the Future Science Group, and himself, as he just explained, a philanthropist. Plenty more still to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, we'll hear from a real-life super dad who is up for a national award. So see you in just a couple of minutes.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. We have a lovely story for you now. a dad from West Yorkshire who adopted 6 children, but children with complex disabilities. He's been nominated for a national award. Since the age of 21, Ben Carpenter has dedicated his life to caring for his children, but tragically Ben lost his 2-year-old son Teddy to sepsis. That was in November 2019. He now works tirelessly to raise awareness of sepsis and its devastating impact. He also supports other parents who have children with disabilities and also cared for his children alone during the lockdowns imposed as a result of the pandemic. To recognise his hard work, Ben has now been shortlisted for the Family Carer of the Year award by national disability charity Sense. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has the story.
For super dad Ben Carpenter, his 6 adopted children are his world. His kids all have complex disabilities and different needs, but this doesn't faze Ben, and he dedicates his life to caring for them and believes it's his calling. When he started his adoption journey 15 years ago, Ben was the youngest gay adopter in the UK at just 21 years old.
I always wanted to be a father. That was all I ever wanted to be, was a father, and I knew that first and foremost I didn't openly seek a relationship, so I knew if I was going to do it, I was going to do it alone. So it was when I just saw a little banner all them years ago saying, you know, can you adopt? And I thought, yeah, I can, but will they want me? Because I had, shall you say, my own myths surrounding adoption, which can I add, and they do not exist, you know. Adoption is open to anyone from any walks of life. And I made them first steps, you know, and I came forward, and at the time, of course, you know, I had to prove who I was. Was I right? Was I the right person to open, you know, my heart and my home to adoption services? And I was, and one turned into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, and I love it. I absolutely love everything about it, and I wouldn't change my life for anything.
Caring for children with special needs can be tough, but this parent wouldn't have it any other way.
I get told a lot that I'm an inspiration, I get called a saint, I get called super dad, etc. And ultimately, it's lovely to be told them things, but I'm just a dad. And okay, I chose the route to becoming a father, different to, you know, most people. I get the most rewarding satisfaction out of seeing all my children thrive, you know, hearing professionals say that, you know, they may not achieve to how they are now. It's wonderful. And yes, you know, they don't achieve stereotypically how a child would. It's very delayed, but when it happens, it's so joyous. From autism, Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, deafness, blindness, some of the children were gastrostomy fed. There's an array of different needs, and some people would be very, very, very daunted by that. But to me, it's just, shall I use the phrase, a walk in the park? And I accept it isn't for everyone, you know. Adoption isn't for everyone, let alone disability. But to me, it comes first hand, if you like. And I, with my skills and my passion, I work on that. Just, you know, inspire the children just to accept who they are and get on with life, really.
Ben looked after his children alone during the coronavirus pandemic lockdowns, ensuring their individual educational needs were met. And now, to recognise his hard work, Ben has been shortlisted for the Family Carer of the Year award by national disability charity Sense.
You know, supporting one disabled child is rewarding and sometimes challenging. Ben supports 6 adopted children, all with different disabilities. It's awe-inspiring. It's such an incredible story of dedication, care and commitment. And being a family carer recognises the best of human nature and how much that families like Ben hold families together, bring the best out of people. And of course, carers make a huge contribution to society. and save government billions of pounds each year. So it's so important we recognise carers like Ben. I think the bit that really needs to be said about Ben and other families is that they've done that support without outside support. During the pandemic, it meant that speech and language therapists came to an end, physio, nursing appointments. So Ben and other family carers, and there's 6.5 million family carers, have been providing that care and support without any outside support from agencies. And Ben's story is so uplifting because actually his children have really thrived, and their school is so proud of what Ben has achieved. So he really deserves to be shortlisted amongst our other fabulous family carers.
The Sense Awards are for the outstanding achievements of people with complex disabilities, as well as the staff, carers, family members, volunteers and fundraisers who support them. And the winners will be announced at the end of November. Anna Riley for GB News.
Just makes coming to work worthwhile, doesn't it, when you see something like that? I hope you enjoyed it as well. Just a Dad. Yeah. Brilliant story. Beautiful story. Now, I've also been told by the team that one of Ben's children, Thomas, is a fan of mine. Yes, Thomas, I have seen the video next to the telephone box and I am absolutely touched and thrilled by it. So I just wanted to say here on live television to you, a big hello and a big shout out. You look after yourself and look after your lovely, lovely dad. Best to you and the whole family, all of you. You're great people, and thank you for that lovely message. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. Plenty more still to come this afternoon, including we'll be taking a look at some of the big issues affecting the environment and our countryside, fly tipping and peatlands. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the latest news headlines. Here is Amelia.
I'm Amelia Harper. Here are the latest headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. Parliament is due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. The Health Secretary Sajid Javid is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get their COVID booster jab to help avoid restrictions over Christmas. In England, a record over 370,000 people received a top-up vaccine yesterday. It means almost 8.5 million people have received one in the 7 weeks since the launch of the latest phase of the programme. Now, there are some flashing images in this next story. Investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at his Astro World Music Festival in Houston on Friday. He was on the stage when the crowd surged forward, which police are calling a mass casualty incident. And tributes are being paid to UB40's founding member Astro, who has died following a short illness. The 64-year-old, whose real name is Terence Wilson, was a vocalist for the band, which originally formed in 1978 in Birmingham. The group sold over 70 million records and produced hits Red, Red Wine, Falling in Love with You and Rat in My Kitchen. You're right up to date. I'll have more on today's main news stories at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. For those who live in towns and cities, it can be easy to lose touch with what's going on in the countryside and the world of farming and agriculture. So each week we try to check in with those at the coalface, as it were, of our rural industries. And today we're going to tackle two issues impacting on our beautiful countryside. Starting with the scourge of fly tipping. It is an issue that I have spoken about before because I feel very strongly about it, with the tippers costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands every year and ruining, just look at that, the countryside. It's dangerous, it's disgusting, and it's horrible. Local councils have to pay to take away the rubbish that tippers can't be bothered to dispose of in an appropriate way. Popular fly-tipping locations often include farmland, so farmers are usually left to pick up the pieces. Well, joining me now, not for the first time, is farmer Will Dickinson, a friend of the show who we spoke to about this issue back in September. I said at the time that we would check back in with him, and there he is. It's exactly what we're doing. You were battling daily rural fly tipping when we last spoke. Have things improved at all?
Not by much, I'm afraid, Alastair. No, the daily scourge still continues. I've just discovered some that came in the last couple of days in the corner of my field here behind me. It just continues. There doesn't seem to be any willingness by authority to seem to bring it to an end.
And that despite the fact that you have tried to work with your local MP.
Yep, we've done a lot of sterling work with the local council and with our MP and with the police and the local police and crime commissioner. The tragedy really is that of the 1 million admitted incidents last year, which they admit they got involved with, was up by 2%. The enforcement action was only taken on under 500,000. And that had fallen by 5%. The average fine for fly tipping is £438. It really staggers me that justice can't seem to catch up with these perpetrators. If you look at the average, when a case comes to court, it really is little more than the cost of a single skip. And magistrates seem to think that that's a perfectly adequate fine. There was trumpeted yesterday a case where they'd taken to court and they'd fined the perpetrators the sum of £2,500 each. That, for incidents that go back years and involve hundreds of tons of material. It just staggers me to think that anybody in responsibility and justice can believe that that's a true way of discouraging people from chucking their rubbish into the countryside.
I think it's absolutely extraordinary, and I think it's absolutely appalling. But tell me this, when you talk to the local MP or the police and crime commissioner or indeed the local council, do they give you any explanation for their inaction, or do they just basically shrug their shoulders?
No, to be fair, we get a lot of action from Duncan Jones is the Waste Fly Tip Partnership in Hertfordshire. Bim Afalami is my MP, and David Lloyd is the PCC here. And all of them have worked very hard to try and do things to mitigate the effect of fly tipping. And the Police and Crime Commissioner has got a special fund as landowners we can access to help clear up fly tipping incidents. But the trouble is that the perpetrators are getting away from it, and they're getting away with it, and they're laughing in the face of the law. Why wouldn't you? You stand a less than 1 in 20 chance of getting caught, and if you do get caught, the average fine is just slightly more than the cost of one skip. So why would you bother to get a skip? Why would you bother to put your rubbish in the bin if you can take it out into the countryside and chuck it there?
It's also, it's a ridiculous double whammy, because I didn't know that fact that you just offered me and the viewers. So not only, if you're a fly tipper, not only do you get away with a relatively small fine, but we, the idiot ratepayers, are contributing to a fund that the council used to help you out, which is good. I'm glad you're getting helped out. But every other law-abiding ratepayer is having to chip into it. I mean, that's an utter nonsense, Will.
It just staggers me that magistrates and judges, the fines are technically unlimited, and there is a maximum of 20 years in prison for this sort of environmental crime. And yet the average fine is £438. Yes, they can seize the vehicle if they can prove it's yours and it was involved in the crime, but most of this stuff is just deposited overnight or on quiet times, and we simply can't get to hold the individuals responsible. But what we do need is some pretty serious thoughts from the magistrates and from the justice to make sure that when people are caught, they are punished, and they are punished proportionately to the crime. An average of £438. So the council have got to go and hire a skip for £300 plus the VAT, and then they've got to pay the man, 2 or 3 hours to come and pick up all this rubbish. So how does that possibly equate to £438 as a fine?
Just crazy. We'll keep in touch. We'll touch back with you again, and let's hope some progress is made and that message gets through loud and clear to the Magistrates Association, to the Justice Department and the Lord Chancellor, and maybe George Eustace at Environment as well. But hope you enjoy the rest of your day, Will, there on Cross Farm in Hertfordshire. Will Dickinson, farmer, friend of the programme, and someone who really the authorities should listen to, because the logic is utterly faultless. Now to another issue that hugely affects our countryside, and it is peat. The National Trust calling for a ban on the use of peat in compost as part of efforts to tackle climate change. And I'm delighted to say that Clifton Bain, an advisor for the Peatland programme at the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, joins me now. We have. Clifton, great to see you there. First and foremost, new readers start here. What's the link between peat and climate change?
The peat is the dead remains of plants that have been preserved over thousands of years, and that's carbon. And they are the biggest natural carbon store on the planet, twice as much as the carbon stored in our forests. And when we damage the peatlands, they release that carbon into the atmosphere, and it's a really significant carbon impact now, because so much of our peatlands have been damaged over the centuries.
And in the olden days, oddly, because I suppose peat in a way on the cycle is several steps back from coal, and peat that gets compressed becomes coal, so the carbon connection is the reverse, as it were. In the old days, it would be cut and used on fires. Nowadays, it's most likely to be seen in fertilisers.
The main impact that currently goes on is composts for gardening. goes into bags for being sold in the retail outlets, and people use it in their gardens. It's worth pointing out that 80% of our peatlands were damaged in the past, primarily for drain for agriculture, for forestry, and those are the ones that are still emitting nearly 23 million tonnes of carbon dioxide every year, which is more than all the sequestration of our forests. So it's quite a significant emission. The current new damage that's occurring on peatlands is primarily from horticultural peat use.
So I'm a huge believer in free markets, and I'm blessed with a lovely garden, and if I want to put some form of nutrient fertiliser down there that has peat in it, and I'm now hearing loud and clear I mustn't do that anymore, are there equally effective alternatives there that I can find at my garden centre?
Absolutely, and the first thing to say is that peat has no nutrient value, and this is part of the problem. People have been using peat in their garden for the wrong purpose, almost wasting it. The peat has to be mixed with nutrients in order to provide a potting material, and there are plenty alternatives. And we've just issued a report recently, Peat-Free Horticulture, which is showing that there are numerous new, exciting, innovative industries making peat-free composts and growing media for plants that work really well. And we've now got many professional products using not just one material, and that was the problem in the past, that the whole industry was reliant on this one material, peat. We've now got a whole range of materials, so there's much more stability and robustness in the industry by using all sorts of materials, from wood fibre, wood bark, coconut fibre. There's now even products using sphagnum moss that's been artificially grown on damaged peatlands. So we have this exciting new industry. We have products that can do just as well. And then the really final point is you can make your own composts and growing media by composting your garden waste. Glorious sunny day here in Edinburgh. I've just been out there snipping all the dead material and putting it into my compost bin. So you have that full range of materials.
Funnily enough, I was just thinking that as you were speaking, Clifton, because the potato peelings, we've been talking about Sunday lunch, potato peelings in the compost along with the leaves that may have been raked up yesterday. It all makes perfect sense. Save the planet and save a bob or two. The final point is about the bit about flooding. We've done a couple of pieces on GB News about the return of the beaver and the amazing work that beavers do in shoring up rivers and keeping them clean and so on. In the case of peat, I mean, it's like a sponge. It doesn't stop flooding as a barrier, but it contains surplus water. It stores surplus water, and that's why we need it.
Well, if you imagine all our uplands, our hillsides, a healthy peatland is rough in effect. All that moss and all the vegetation slows the flow of water. As it rains heavily, the water is slowly released off the hills. It's like a saturated sponge, if you want to take the analogy. The water still flows off the hill, but much slower, up to 25% slower. And that gives the downstream flood defence mechanisms time, and it avoids these huge pulses of water. So if you have a damaged peatland, which most of our uplands are, the water from the rainfall event flows off very quickly and overcomes the downstream defences. So healthy peatlands slowing the flow of water is what we want. It's also really important for our drinking water. It helps retain good quality and avoids the brown water that comes off damaged peatlands.
And stuff. Clifton Bain, the IUCN UK Peatland Programme Advisor. Thank you very much indeed for your time and for your wisdom. There we are, you see. Save the planet. Never, ever underestimate the potency of nature in helping us do what many of us think is the right thing to do. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we have plenty more to come this Sunday afternoon. We'll be crossing live to Mexico to get the latest on the Grand Prix, which gets underway a little later this evening. So, see you in a couple of minutes.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is mainly dry with sunny spells, windy with a few showers in the west. Let's take a look at the details. For the southwest, the afternoon will be a dry one with scattered clouds, some sunny spells in between and a northwesterly breeze. Colder than yesterday with highs of around 12 Celsius. For London and the southeast, a fine and dry afternoon with sunny spells and a breezy northwesterly winds, temperatures peaking at around 12 Celsius. For South Wales, it'll be a dry afternoon with sunny spells, as well as some scattered cloud and top temperatures of 11 Celsius. A drier afternoon for Manchester and northwest England, as early showers will have faded away. Staying windy, especially along the coast, but winds continuing to ease through the day, highs of 11 Celsius. A windy and gusty afternoon for northeast England, but remaining fine, dry and largely sunny. Temperatures peaking at around 10 Celsius towards the coast, but feeling cooler than that in the wind. For Glasgow and southern Scotland, a drier afternoon with morning showers having all but died out. Staying rather windy, although the wind will continue to ease as we head towards the evening. A fine afternoon for Northern Ireland with scattered cloud, sunny spells and mostly light winds. Just northeastern areas will remain exposed to this northwesterly breeze. Temperatures peaking at 11 Celsius. Staying dry across much of the UK into this evening, with winds becoming light, turning chilly after dark, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. The Mexico Grand Prix will get underway later on today. Valtteri Bottas managed to secure a surprise pole position yesterday, beating out teammate Lewis Hamilton for a Mercedes 1-2. Championship leader Max Verstappen could only manage third place. His teammate Sergio Perez, of course, is the hometown favourite, and he's in fourth place. Mercedes are locked in the first row and Red Bull in the second. Philip Duncan has one of the best jobs in the world, in my humble opinion. He is the F1 correspondent at PA Sport, and there he is. Great to see you, and thank you for finding time for us on what I know is going to be an incredibly busy day for you. Will Bottas play the good guy, or is he going for everything he can get before he finally leaves Mercedes?
Oh, well, I think he'll be playing the good guy, Alastair, would be my prediction.
I mean, it's all about the championship battle now, isn't it, between Hamilton and Verstappen? So every point that Hamilton can get now until the remainder of the season is going to be absolutely crucial. And the fact that he starts ahead of Verstappen today in Mexico is a bit of a surprise. Hamilton said last night, that it's a shock to be ahead of Verstappen and Red Bull, because this is a track that, as you know, traditionally has suited Red Bull. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens. But I think, Bottas on pole, but I would not be surprised to see him asked to move over later and for Hamilton to come past if that happens.
One of those coded messages about going to plan A or plan 9 or whatever it might be. Tell me this, you've watched this and write about it with great authority. As we close in on that final few races and the championship decider, is the pressure beginning to show on Verstappen? I've argued all along one of Lewis Hamilton's greatest strengths is cool, calm and collected. Is Verstappen feeling the pressure?
I think the answer is no at the moment. I mean, we saw last week in Austin. I mean, he drove superbly, probably his one of his best drives that we've seen from him. He was absolutely solid the whole way through. He lost the lead to Hamilton at the start, but then he gained it back at the pit stops. And even at the closing stages, when Hamilton was closing in on Verstappen, he showed great sort of mental strength not to, show any strain or pressure or make any mistakes. So I think what we've seen from him really so far is that, he showed great maturity, given he's only really 24 and this is the first championship he's fighting for. But as you say, at the business end of the season, only 5 races left. And, we might see him make a mistake. But at the moment, I would say no, he's not really showing any pressure of fighting for this championship. But we're at the business end now, so let's see if that changes.
Yeah. Is your money still on Verstappen or are you on Hamilton? I don't mean this race, I mean the championship.
I think I said to you last week that it might be Hamilton, so I probably should really stick by that, I guess. But I think it's really a must-win for Hamilton today. He's 12 points back. If Verstappen wins or he outscores Hamilton, then it's starting to get a bit, too many points for him to gain back Hamilton. That is. So I think, in terms of the championship, I still will marginally stick with Hamilton, but I think he needs to win today and start to turn this championship around.
I agree with you. Finally, in a quick one, if you'd be so kind, not too good for George Russell at the moment, or Lando Norris, the two promising bright young Brits, but it'll all be better next year, won't it?
Yeah, they're both serving grid penalties today, so they're at the back of the pack. So obviously difficult for George in his Williams, which is never the best machine out there. But it could be quite a fun race for Norris coming through from the back in his McLaren. So yeah, let's see what he can do. But yeah, it's not going to be an easy race for either of them this afternoon.
Well, you enjoy it, every frame of it, and thank you for breaking into a busy schedule to talk to us. Philip Duncan, F1 correspondent of PA Sport. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. Lots of brilliant conversations and guests still to come this Sunday afternoon, and it is exactly 2 o'clock. So, hello and welcome back if you've been with me for the duration, or hello if you've just joined me for the last hour. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for that next hour, I'll be keeping you company. Plenty still to come, including my thoughts and, more importantly, yours on our main discussion today, which is about philanthropy. Is it the way forward, or is it a sign of a flawed system? Plus, Ken Follett is back with a brand new thriller, and he and his wife Barbara will be joining me live in the studio. So all of that to come and more. But first, let's get a news roundup with Amelia Harper.
I'm Amelia Harper. This is your news at 2 o'clock. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get their COVID booster jab to help avoid restrictions over Christmas. In England, a record over 370,000 people received a top-up vaccine yesterday. It means almost 8.5 million people have received one in the 7 weeks since the launch of the latest phase of the programme. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. Parliament is due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. Journalist David Semple has told GB News that controversies like this rarely have an impact on the way people vote.
This is one of these broad picture politicians. He's not a great administrator at all, but he will probably win the next general election, despite what all the polls are saying now, and he will switch. I don't think he's any more corrupt than any British prime minister we've had before. You have to go back to Tony Blair, who I think did a lot more damage to this country. And I think there's a big mess being cleaned up by the Conservatives, some of it their own mess.
The US is reopening its borders to UK visitors who are fully vaccinated against COVID tomorrow. The country has been closed since early 2020 due to the pandemic. Travellers from Ireland and the 26 Schengen nations in Europe, China, India and South Africa are amongst those also allowed in on Monday. Meherwan Bagorzi, the managing director of Global Travel Experts, has told GB News holidaymakers are already booking flights.
It's something we've been waiting to hear for a very, very long time, and it's finally happened. So it's all-round excitement. I mean, the whole travel industry as a whole are celebrating this, and we've got customers booked to fly to America as early as tomorrow morning on the first flights.
Now, there are some flashing images in this next story. Investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at his Astro World Music Festival in Houston on Friday. He was on stage when the crowd surged forward, which police are calling a mass casualty incident.
My fans really mean the world to me, and I always just really want to leave them with a positive experience. And anytime I can make out, anything that's going on, I stop the show and, help them get the help they need, I could just never imagine the severity of the situation.
Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has condemned an assassination attempt on Iraq's Prime Minister and supports his call for calm and restraint. Security has been increased in Baghdad's Green Zone after Mustafa al-Hamidi was targeted by an armed drone. The area houses government buildings and foreign embassies. The attack comes amid tensions sparked by Iran-backed militias who are refusing to accept last month's election results. The Environment Secretary says the government is considering taxing imports from countries with poor environmental records. The carbon border tax would attempt to reduce pollution and help businesses protect their green status. George Eustice insists the possible move would not increase food prices. He says the levy would take several years to bring in. Meanwhile, national trust organisations worldwide are calling for a ban on the use of peat in compost as part of efforts to tackle climate change. The charity says healthy peatlands act as a carbon sink to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. They also help control flooding and provide a home for wildlife. National Trust Director General Hilary McGrady says the government must step up and play their part. Expedia has stopped selling holidays which involve captive dolphins and whales. The travel firm says they've adjusted their animal welfare policy and attractions and activities with dolphins will no longer be available on their sites. Virgin Holidays made the same decision 2 years ago. And England rugby will have their captain Owen Farrell back when they play Australia next Saturday after his COVID case was confirmed as a false positive. He missed the 69-3 defeat of Tonga in the autumn opening at Twickenham yesterday after being forced to self-isolate. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Thanks, Amelia. I am Alastair Stewart, and for the next hour, I'll be keeping you company along with friends and friendly guests. Still to come, in just a moment, you'll be hearing my take on our top story today. Is philanthropy the way forward, or is it a flawed system? But before that, I'll be sharing what you think about the matter. Plus, we'll have all of the latest news from the world of entertainment, and Ken Follett and his wife Barbara will be joining me live in the studio to talk everything from politics to writing about family, life and more. So before we get to your views on the issue and mine, let's take a look back at what some of our great guests have had to say about whether philanthropy is a flawed system. After the news that about £12 million from Max Mosley is being donated to Oxford University, we started the conversation with the founder of universityphilanthropy.com, Andrew Wigley, who told us who does due diligence on where the money is coming from and why.
This is a very thorny topic, right? I mean, the whole area it has its pitfalls, and how you navigate it is very challenging. And the university, of course, would have had its systems in place to have worked out, well, do we accept this money or do we not? But there does feel like there's something a bit off about it, right? I mean, whether it's Madam Tow's 155 million coming into to Linacre, or whether it's the Mosley channel, I think it's this. If you or I put a fiver into a donation box, we don't expect very much from it. It's, you know, a thank you would be nice, but it's done as an act of altruism. The problem is when the University of Oxford goes out fundraising, it's looking for money, and there are clearly conditions which then are expected or are allowed to come with that donation. And in the case of Madam Tow, Oxford would deny this, of course, but they would have had a shopping list when they were starting to identify prospective donors who may make very big donations to the university. And one of those might well have been, we'll rename the university in your honour. And that, it seems to have made a big appeal to Madam Tow, and so it is. £155 million later, Linacre College is being renamed. The same with the Max Mosley gift. The chair, the Mosley chair in physics, well, it feels like there's a transaction here, doesn't it? It doesn't feel like it's necessarily an act of altruism, because they are going to have to name the chair in the honour of the Mosley family. Now, personally, universities have been at this for a long time, and I don't necessarily see a big problem about selling the assets, if you like, the names to different things. Where I think it is a bit more disappointing is the name. Is on the side of the donor. I mean, if you really are interested in making a contribution and a selfless act of philanthropy, you wouldn't necessarily be looking to get some sort of name recognition out of it. And moreover, you know, would £6 million be the best investment in physics at Oxford University, or could you make a big contribution to the University of Stafford, for example, where you can equally study physics, where the Mosley family have a long family association with the county?
Andrew Wigley there. I also spoke to my friend Sir George Cox. George is the former Director General of the Institute of Directors. I asked him whether private contributions provide something special that the taxpayer and government can't.
There's sufficient demands on the taxpayer already. I mean, we look at the healthcare system, we look at health in the community. There's so much demand. This money is not going to come from government. And if you look at, for example, universities, if you're going to compete with the big American universities, like them, the money is going to come from generous donation. And personally, I think it's very good when people have accumulated a lot of wealth that it goes to such good causes and is put to such use.
In your view, and you rub shoulder, I mean, yourself wealthy, but also particularly when you were running the IOD, you rub shoulders.
Don't know about.
Well, relatively speaking, George, but you certainly rub shoulders with a lot of very, very wealthy people, and I've attended conferences with you with some of the richest in the world. In a sense, are they also saying, and I'm going to press you on it because it's a variation of the question I just asked you, do they look at that challenge and say, yeah, the universities that need money aren't going to get it from the government, but not only will I provide that money, but I want to give a little steer, just a little directional hint as to where I'd like that university to go?
Well, whenever an organisation accepts a donation, you have to look at who it's coming from, why they're giving it, and what they expect in return. Let me give you an example, if I can, from Merlin, the humanitarian charity that I used to chair. The more money raised, the more lives saved, the more distress relieved. And we had a situation a few years back where we had a very substantial offer of money on a multi-year basis from a big international corporation. And it was unrestricted, which means you can use it for anything, which is what a charity like Merlin needed, because you can respond quickly without having to seek funds for it. That would seem tremendous. But that organisation had a very bad reputation for malpractice in the third world. So you can say the money is being given to us to clean up their name. Okay, on those circumstances, you say, right, morally, we can't touch that. We're not going to be part of whitewashing it.
And they didn't take the money. Power to George's and Merlin's elbow. Finally, we spoke to James Drake, a dedicated philanthropist and chairman of the Future Science Group. Now, one of his initiatives is the Drake Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organisation committed to understanding and improving the welfare of people impacted by head injuries. He told me how he is helping to support them.
What I was able to do there, you see, was to add value, not just money, because first of all, it was my idea. No one else had done it. The rugby union, you know, the people that run the sport hadn't done it. They should have perhaps. But I was able to add value because Contact Sport knew all about sports medicine. They were the world experts on that. But they knew very, very little about neuroscience research. And from my science publishing background, I was able to connect them, act as a sort of bridge, so that I was able to connect that team to the very good neuroscience department of John Hardy at UCL, and also the department in Imperial College that did the imaging work under Dave Sharp. So anyway, that study then evolved, and it took a lot longer than I would have liked. And this is one of the problems that with science, it takes a lot longer, and it can be incredibly frustrating for impatient people like me.
Yeah, James,
this year,
James, let me just butt in because the clock is against us, I fear. But I didn't interrupt that because I wanted to hear that logic, and it leads me very nicely to my last question, and it nods back to something that George said. Philanthropy is important. George argued not because it does certain things better than Her Majesty's government might do, but as with your brain imaging and scanning and research, because it does things that the government don't do and wouldn't otherwise get done. Is that your core driver?
Of course it is, Alastair. Of course it is, because only this year, the government has decided to have a committee on the concussion in sport, the conclusion of that committee, one of them was that the sports were marking their own homework. They've come in much later, and of course, as a result of our studies and of others, then the sport itself is impelled to make the game safer. But in a way, I and others too have catalyzed this whole process. Who else would have picked it up in 2014 and run with it? You know, there were wonderful people like Dawn Astle was there, but she was performing a very different function. So who else would have picked it up? It would have gone for 2 or 3 more years before the game itself would have done these sort of studies.
James Drake there rounding up a sample of my contributors. So let's now hear what you had to say about this discussion. Mark tweeted, "Philanthropic doesn't necessarily mean altruistic. Philanthropists may get something out of their activities, but does it really matter? If society rejects these activities, progress and therefore change may be much slower. We need everyone in this fight." Sarah emailed, "The problem with philanthropy is that it doesn't compensate society for all of the years you put your size 9 boot into working class people's faces and made their lives suffer. Paying taxes helps all society. Donations only help the private recipients. Also, donations go against tax. So, wealthy business people can claim tax back." Sarah, we wanted that one in because it's very, very strong and takes a completely different view from me. The only thing I would say, and I'm not to disagree with you or to agree with you, but I think it's reasonable to say that working class folk also benefit from these donations if they go to universities and so on and so forth, because that's very often a part of why the money goes in the first place. Paul sent an email. "The mentality and hypocrisy of the delusional woke fanatics of the Oxford University leadership swamp is a national disgrace." Thank you, Paul. Christian sent us an email. "There is a risk the billionaires funding these causes may be doing so for their own vain glory, but the benefits do outweigh the the disadvantages. There's a practical observation. Private backing not only helps new education institutions become a reality, it also cuts out left-leaning interference from government agencies. Not sure about the last bit, but the middle bit's very much what George Cox and James Drake were saying. If they don't do it, it won't get done. Andrew dropped us an email. We have seen the influence of Gates working through Imperial College and Neil Ferguson. All Gates' money is aligned to promote his interests and agenda. What, like getting rid of malaria, Andrew? Simon sent us a tweet. The real philanthropists are ordinary people who donate hours of labour for little reward. We don't need extremely wealthy people who rarely earn the money they accrue donating to charities. What we do need is unfettered access to goods and services. Magnus tweets, philanthropists should not have the automatic right to interfere in democracies around the world. Couldn't agree with you more on that one, Magnus. They are unelected, most have low IQs. I don't agree with that at all, and only have one agenda, to steal yet more of our taxes. It's a view, Magnus, with which I do not agree, apart from the first bit. Andy tweets, philanthropy is the philosophy of teaching someone to fish to feed the family. Charity is the philosophy of offering the fish to feed the family. Philanthropy, therefore, is the way forward. Helen sends a tweet. A prime example is the Gates Foundation giving funds to institutions and organisations globally involved with COVID, including 38 UK universities, SAGE, Imperial, World Health Organization, MHRA, and many others. Thanks for that, Helen. Dave sent an email. Lineker College was named after presumably someone called Lineker. Yes, that's very true. Who created or funded the college in expectation that the college would persist in his name in perpetuity. No, it was named to celebrate him, as it happens, but Google it, you'll find out. It's presumption of the current administration of the college to think that they can ride roughshod over his wishes just for a financial donation. The owner of a Vietnamese airline has no connection to a UK college and is attempting to buy its name, and it's inappropriate. How many years before students demand the college is renamed again? Like the last point, Dave, it comes, it goes. And finally, Donna. Mark Twain gets a second outing here. From the words of Mike Twain, give a man the fish, you only feed them for a day. Teach a man how to fish, and you've fed him for life. So, a lively discussion there, and thank you so much for those and for many more that we didn't have time for. It's time now for my take, a little shorter than usual. I never felt encouraged to buy cigarettes or tobacco because I was an undergraduate at Bristol University, funded by WD and H.O. Wills. Right or wrong, it was a personal choice. I'm equally fairly certain that my son never felt the need to become an Anglican whilst attending Winchester College, founded by Bishop Wickham. That said, I have always admired companies who pour money into universities, like Boots and Nottingham and Roots Chrysler and Warwick. Internationally, it seems to me to be splendid that billionaires like Bezos and Gates can deep into their deep pockets to tackle malaria and global warming. They tend to be individuals and indeed companies who've displayed an ability to create wealth by meeting public demand. That they also share that wealth to meet public need seems to me to be a win-win. It's often more reliable and more effective than the taxation that governments pursue them for with varying degrees of success and the money that they themselves spend on avoiding those taxes. Let them give, let it be rewarded. Incidentally, I also believe that charities get things done better by those who really care, rather than by governments and civil servants who try because they feel obliged to do it or because it's simply their job. That was at the heart of David Cameron's Big Society. And as I've said before on this programme, it is a policy I think he really should have stuck with, or somebody else needs to take a fresh look at it. All of that said, I don't want dodgy types or dodgy countries buying our kids' brains. I think we need good due diligence in assessing whether we really need some of that cash, given its sources or the motivations of some of the donors. That we can check and that we can police. Having done that, the ones that pass muster deserve tax relief for their donations, and we should also do whatever we can through tax and other things to offer maximum support to our charities, doing good stuff for free. We need great public services, including great universities. If the rich and successful, or at least those with clean hands, want to pay for it, I say hurrah bring it on. A new age of philanthropy can and should, in my humble opinion, be the way forward. So there you have it. Lots more to come this Sunday afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends. From Strictly Come Dancing to the rumoured lineup for this year's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Our showbiz reporter has the lot. I've got an opinion. If you've got an opinion, I do want to hear it, whether we've missed the stories that we should have been covering or something you want covered next week. Get in touch via email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tell me your opinion, of course, always on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. With that in mind, see you in a couple of minutes.
Dry and chilly with clear spells for most, windy in the northeast. For southwest England tonight, it will continue to be dry across the region with clear spells, though it will feel chillier than recent evenings, dropping to single figures. For southeast England, it will be a dry evening with some clear spells across the area. Temperatures will drop in more rural places. Similarly, for South Wales, a dry evening with long-lived clear spells, but feeling colder than of late with some misty patches. Across the Midlands, it will be a dry evening, though there will be a little more cloud around at times. Here, temperatures will drop off to a low of 7 degrees. Further north and east, it will remain breezy this evening, but it'll be dry and clear. It will be chilly here as well, though milder along the coast. Elsewhere in South Scotland, the winds will start to ease this evening. It will be dry with clear skies at times. Feeling a little bit cold here too, with a rural frost expected. For Northern Ireland, it'll be cold and clear this evening too, but through the night it will turn breezier, milder, and cloudier from the west by the morning. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. I'm delighted to say, as promised, joining me now in the studio is entertainment reporter Ellie Phillips with all of the latest and what have you. So first, strictly, I admit this every week. I stay up too late on a Saturday because I do like watching. And my favourite is Charleston.
Oh.
And goodness me, A, it was a cracker, and B, it did them proud.
Yes, it really did. So AJ Odudu and her partner Kai Widdrington performed an amazing Charleston. I mean, the energy was incredible. They did super well, and they almost got the perfect score, 39 out of 40, topped the leaderboard with it. And this is all with the backdrop of rumours that they are an item, which is actually unusual in Strictly because they're both single, so there's no Strictly curse, there's no scandal. They're both single. They can do what they want. It's absolutely fine.
Frankly speaking, what's it got to do with anybody if they are free items?
I know, but I think it's just so nice, isn't it, to think that two people can fall in love doing what they're doing.
The other thing, I said this to my wife several weeks back, is he doesn't look like the classic, typical ballroom dancer, and indeed a world champion ballroom dancer.
All. Yeah, and he's so young as well.
So ordinary and lovely.
Yeah, 100%. So he's only 26. He looks like a normal guy, and then he's got these phenomenal skills. Yeah. And I think this is so great for him because he's doing so well, and it's his first time on Strictly. He only joined this season, and he's doing incredibly well. She's phenomenal. I mean, I can't believe how amazing she is. When she gets thrown about...
Emotionally, like that, when she gets criticised and when she gets praised.
Oh, yeah, and that's what, as a programme, as an entertainment programme, that's what you want to see. You want to be drawn in, you want to follow their journey, and they are having a real journey. But yeah, like I said, according to Mail on Sunday, they're an item. A few weeks ago, under the microphone, it picked up him telling her that he loved her. So I kind of love this love story, and that's one of the good things about Strictly is it takes you through to Christmas when everyone's loved up and it's got all that kind of romanticism about it. So really, really good with that.
We wish them well.
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart's favourite is Joe and Jana's.
Yes.
Despite one very obvious potential pitfall in that fascination and admiration.
Yes.
But they also, it's intriguing because they're both clearly amazingly skilled. But they've also had a little bit of that. But they were great last night.
Amazing last night. They did their Rumba last night, and it was so amazing. It was so emotional, beautiful to watch. And I think the thing that's so special about them is that they are making history and breaking down barriers in such a beautiful way, because you watch them and you don't see necessarily, a same-sex couple. You just see incredible dancing and phenomenal talent, and that's wonderful to see. They've set the bar really high. And I think, like you said as well, this year in Strictly, more than any other year, there has been no clear winner. There's no, there's one or two that are really good. They're all really good, and it changes every week at who's topping the leaderboard, and so I think that makes it a lot more interesting to watch.
And a massive ratings triumph still for the BBC, but with one of ITV's big blockbusters in the wings. I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Abroad this year or still in Wales?
No, so it's going to be back in Wales this year, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm not sure the celebrities will be too happy about that because obviously it's a lot nicer and warmer in Australia, but they are going to go into the castle in Wales.
But Wales is a very beautiful country.
It's stunning, absolutely beautiful.
And is it the same castle?
It's the same castle, yeah, same setup, same everything this year.
And will I know everybody who's in it?
Do you know?
I mean, I don't mean as a personal friend, but will I recognise?
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, that's my pal. No, you will definitely know some of the names. So, essentially, according to Strictly, according to I'm a Celebrity, no names have been released. But because of COVID, they've gone into this quarantine in Wales and they've been pictured there. So it's kind of obvious who they are. So the rumoured lineup is topped by David Ginola, the French footballer. So he's their big name. He's their big signing. We've also got Richard Madeley, obviously household name. Frankie Bridge from the Saturdays, who you might know. OK, so she's a pop star. She's on Loose Women. She's very well liked, very well loved. Arlene Phillips, Strictly fame. And she's going to be the oldest they've ever had. She's 78.
She was which is one of the dancers in Top of the Pops.
Yes, and she's a choreographer, and she's a whole career in dance. We've also got a music producer and DJ called Naughty Boy, who I'm not sure that you do know, but he's produced a lot of hits with big name, musicians and artists. Louise Minchin is also going to be on there. Well, rumoured to be on there. Former BBC.
I do know and count as a friend as well.
And then
she
now
loves horses. So
yes,
she's forgiven everything.
And I think she'll be lovely as well. I think she's so well liked, so I'm hoping she brings that warmth to it. We've got, as always, a lot of soap stars from EastEnders. We've got Adam Woodyard, from Emmerdale, Danny Miller, and from Coronation Street, Simon Gregson. We've also got, you might know, Olympic diver Matty Lee, who just won gold recently in the Olympics. So they've got him, which is a great signing. Obviously, he's big news at the moment. Last two, we've got a radio presenter called Stucci Stai and a Paralympian called Kadina Cox. So a really well-rounded lineup there. And I think credible people to be in there, I think they've done well.
I'm sure it will prove popular. We discussed this beforehand because it's important that we take a very clear tonal break now from Strictly, because you have breaking news on the dreadful accident at Astro World.
Yeah, Astro World, obviously, on Friday night in Texas. The Travis Scott concert was sold out, 500 people. There have been 8 confirmed dead, and now 5 of the names have actually been released, which is the first that we've had. We've got a 14-year-old called John Hilgret. God. He's the youngest to have died, 14 years old. Big fan. Went with his 15-year-old friend who survived the incident. We've got Brianna Rodriguez, who's 18. Franco Patino, 21, Rodolfo Pena, 23, and a Danish babe who's 27, so really young people. There are 5 people to have been named. There are 8 confirmed dead so far, but they're saying the number could rise because at least 25 were taken to hospital in cardiac arrest in all sorts of states, and obviously hundreds injured in this incident as well.
Dreadful.
Yeah,
Well, Amelia's been keeping across it on the news bulletins, and of course we will keep across it throughout the rest of the day. But for now, on the lighter stuff, thank you very much indeed. But you're a good journalist, so thank you for that stuff.
Thank you so
Ellie. It really does matter. Thank you for Ellie. Thank you very much indeed. You are watching Ellie Phillips there, not Ali. And me, Alastair Stewart and friends. Plenty more still to come this afternoon, including I am delighted to say I will be joined live in the studio by a real power couple, Barbara Follett and Ken Follett. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the latest news, indeed, from Amelia.
Thanks, Alastair. I'm Amelia Harper, and here are your latest headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. Parliament is due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get their COVID booster jab to help avoid restrictions over Christmas. In England, a record over 370,000 people received a top-up vaccine yesterday. It means almost 8.5 million people have received one in the 7 weeks since the launch of the latest phase of the programme. Now, there are some flashing images in this next story. Investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated after the stampede at his Astro World Music Festival in Houston on Friday. He was on stage when the crowd surged forward, which police are calling a mass casualty incident. England rugby will have their captain Owen Farrell back when they play Australia next Saturday after his COVID case was confirmed as a false positive. He missed the 69-3 defeat of Tonga in the autumn opener at Twickenham yesterday after being forced to self-isolate. Aston Villa have sacked manager Dean Smith after 3 years in charge. His side suffered a 5th successive Premier League defeat on Friday, losing 1-0 Southampton at St Mary's. He guided the club back into the top flight in his first season in charge via the playoffs. The 50-year-old also led Villa to the League Cup final at Wembley in 2020, narrowly losing 2-1 to Manchester City. I'll be back with a full update at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. This show's called Alastair Stewart and Friends, and the people who join me now live in the studio certainly fit that bill. She has been credited as the person responsible for the smartening up of the Labour Party. She and I go back a long way, me reporting on what she was up to, her just getting on with it. Something so successful that it was dubbed Folletting. And he is the worldwide best-selling author behind novels that have sold over 160 million copies, with the new book that I just mentioned in passing a couple of times earlier, Never. Just look at the size of it, and I didn't miss a beat. It is brilliant, and it is released next week. But also, he took time out in one of the trickier periods of my life to just spend a little time on the phone and to help sort me out, and wrote me an absolutely delightful note inside a book, which I cherish. Delighted to be joined now, live on the sofa, by Barbara and Ken Follett. It's lovely to see you. When we first set this programme up, I said to the producer, I'd love to talk to couples who had an important part to play in my life and who I respect and admire for various reasons. And we had Barbara, we had the Howards on, both of whom echo you. Michael is a top politician and Sandra is a top novelist, and it worked really well. And I said the Folletts were a couple that I really wanted to get on. So, thank you for doing it.
Pleasure.
We're going to talk about the book, but I want to talk about you as well. And one thing that struck me particularly was, as with so many of us, childhood really matters crucially. And I'll start with you, Barbara, because as I say, I watched you and reported on you as a political activist.
I remember.
Your childhood featuring Jamaica, Ethiopia and South Africa in those early and then later teenage years had a huge impact on everything you subsequently did.
You only really realise the size of that impact when you get older. And I've had time to reflect on it, and you're completely right. You know, 20 years ago, I'd have said, oh, no. But it really did. My father's itinerant lifestyle, and the fact that I saw so often, dire poverty, death. When I was a child and we entered Addis Ababa in Ethiopia for the first time, on the way out of the airport, there was a gibbet with 3 men hanging dead. And my father said, don't look. And so, of course, I looked. But you saw life in a very raw way. I got used to it. That gibbet was still there when we left in 1957. And then going to South Africa and the whole of apartheid and the fight against apartheid really formed my life and my politics.
Oh, it hit your family directly.
Yes,
and
very
your own
direct.
relationships.
Yes, with my ex-husband, father of my 2 elder children, being assassinated, one of the first people to be assassinated by the security people.
But women's rights and the potential of women became much more important in your political life than issues of race relations.
I began to see that one of the causes of problems of poverty, particularly in Africa, but in the whole world, was women not being educated. Because women are the main educators, and if their own education suffers, and if their own knowledge is low, then the children suffer, the family suffers. Women's health became very vital to me, because in many parts of the world, women die very young, as they did in Victorian Britain. They died very young in childbirth mainly, or, some feature around their reproductive system. And I became really, passionate about this, and helped to set up various groups in South Africa and a political group of women who came together to try to counter apartheid.
Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about how well that's going at the moment as far as Labour women are concerned in just a little while. But let me bring Ken in at this point. The thing the standout for me, and it's almost funny, is that growing up in a Plymouth Brethren childhood, you weren't allowed to watch TV. Ergo, where do you go and how does that play to your subsequent career? You went to the library.
I went to the library, yes. Well, in those days, every Saturday morning, the local cinema would have movies for kids.
Yeah.
And every child...
Did you get 2 and 6pence to spend on the sweeties as well?
I couldn't go.
Oh!
I wasn't allowed to go to the movies.
So not the movies either?
No. And that's when I went to the public library. I joined the public library when I was 7.
Yeah.
And I've been a voracious reader all my life. And, of course, at the time, I was outraged that I got second class, as it were. I had to go to the library. They were all going to the pictures. And now, of course, I realise it's probably quite good for me.
Didn't turn out too bad.
That's exactly right.
But you also went via My Trade and were a good journalist for a wee while. But I get the sense that you got bored with it rather than it getting bored with you.
You know, I realised that I didn't love newspapers, and I did love books, especially novels. The truth is, Alastair, I wasn't that great a newspaper reporter. I wasn't terrible, but I've always been ambitious, and it became clear to me, you know, all of us as young reporters, what we wanted to be in the end was editor of the Sunday Times. That was, in those days, that was nirvana for young reporters. And it became clear to me that I was not good enough. And it also became clear to me that I didn't love papers enough. And I started trying to write fiction.
Trying to, and it went extremely well. Before we get to that and the book itself, how did you meet? And also, given that you were a driven and successful novelist quite early on, and you were a driven and successful, you were a minister, you were PPS to our lovely mutual friend, the late, great Tessa Jowell as well.
Yes.
A, how did you meet? And B, how did you work out a modus operandi?
Well, we tell slightly different stories.
Well, we met at a Labour Party meeting. That was the first.
We agree on that. Yes.
There's romantic for you.
Yeah. He came to a meeting which a friend of mine, I was the secretary of the Farnham branch Labour Party. Farnham has never returned anything but a Conservative MP, so it was a fairly hopeless quest. But Peter Hain came to speak to us, and suddenly in came Ken. In those days, he was as thin as a rake and had an afro and a really not very fetching moustache.
And what did you see?
Well, I saw this Labour Party branch being ruled with a rod of iron by this bossy woman.
And lo and behold, all these years later, she now actually runs the office and runs the business side.
Now runs him.
The final bit on the duality, I know for a fact Gucci search lists hurt you and it annoyed you and it angered you because wealth did not impact upon your ambitions and your beliefs. Say it publicly, how badly did it hurt you when you were accused of being Gucci socialists?
Do you know, not that badly. I own nothing by Gucci. And what did irritate me...
That's the most brilliant answer. Although I suspect you could actually afford one.
I could. But the thing that really... It just cheesed me off when they said you're a champagne socialist.
Yeah.
I happen to be extraordinarily allergic to alcohol. I cannot drink champagne, so I'm a cappuccino socialist.
Yeah. You won't mind my saying, but partly because, again, your childhood background, alcohol was...
My father was an alcoholic who died of it at 56.
Isn't it great that so many MPs are speaking out about that publicly now, campaigning about it? Really, really does matter. This, when it arrived, as I showed the viewers earlier on, if you look at that, it runs to just short of 900 pages. It's a cracker. It's the first for a wee while. And you say in your blurb about it that you wanted to try and change the genre in the way that Godfather did with crime books. Both in scale and meticulous research, Never makes other international spy novels appear timid, lazy and parochial. Sunday Times. Job done.
Well,
talking to a man who wanted to be the editor of the Sunday Times.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very complimentary review, but of course, the particular quote also runs down my friends and colleagues who are also writers of international spy thrillers. So
it's a tough life out there, you know. You just got to get it.
Yes.
As I said, I was glued to it. Jihadis, African tensions, people smuggling, Chinese struggles, the American right, political right, superstate power plays, issues that worry me, issues clearly that play upon you, and we are sworn we're not going to give any hint at all of the punchline because it's just amazing. But this is a catechism of the world's worries.
Well, yes, and of course, the idea came to me partly because the world is in a more dangerous place now than it has been for all of my lifetime. We've always had the threat of nuclear war, but now we might be wiped out by climate change.
China, in a sense, replacing the Russia that we all grew up with when we were Cold War observers, and reports even yesterday that the Chinese are thinking of increasing their nuclear stockpiles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, we sort of got to know the Russians, didn't we, over the decades, and we were able to predict what they would do. And China's completely new. It's difficult to understand the Chinese government. It's difficult to figure out what their aims are. And so it's difficult for politicians and diplomats to deal with China because they don't know what they're going to do next.
Does he consult with you? Or does he come up with an idea that he wants to deal with himself? Because, without being silly, and you know me well enough to know I'm not being silly, but, you know, the President of the United States of America is a woman. There is a very complicated family tussle within it as well, which, in a sense, are issues that a woman might bring particular insights to. Do you discuss plot?
We do. I don't approve it. Ken just gets an idea and then generally tells me about it. And
Michael Howard said that Sandra corrects grammar.
I generally edit, don't I? Every draft that Ken does and the outline, I will edit. And he's very good at taking criticism, as long as it's written down.
Yes. Well, all of us accept criticism if it's valid.
It's helpful, yes.
I have to make a confession, and you know this because I've told you, I love the medieval books particularly, and following that community and the subsequent work, which is so brilliant, which follows the people of that community. I never quite understood why you did.
Well,
I understand why you're absolutely hooked into something like this, which is geopolitics, 21st century and beyond. But what attracted you to the medieval era?
Well, it started with the cathedrals.
Yeah.
And
craftsmanship.
And the beauty and so on. And, of course, just going back to the Plymouth Brethren, our church had plain walls, no pictures, no statues, anything like that. And it wasn't a church, it was a hall. It was called a gospel hall, always. And so when I first, as a young adult, looked at cathedrals, I was blown away by them. I hadn't got used to it. I mean, a lot of people, of course, go to church all their lives, and it's normal to them. And to me, it was astonishing. And the question is, why did medieval people want one of these? Huge, expensive, beautiful, still standing after 800 years. Why did medieval people, who, by the way, lived in wooden huts and slept on the floor, why did they build this? And why, and also how? Those were the questions that drove me to write The Pillars of the Earth, the story of the building of a medieval cathedral. Which, at the time, when I came up with the idea, a lot of people didn't think it was a very good idea, including some of my publishers. They said, Ken, you've had all this success with spies and secret agents, Nazis and the KGB, and now you want to write a novel about building a church in the Middle Ages? Are you sure?
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. Tying those two together and bringing you back in as well, there's just a wonderful quote in the book. There are lots of wonderful quotes. In George Washington's time, the newspapers weren't interested in the president's offspring. They had more important things to say. That's a very interesting observation in what is a spy thriller, but it's about journalism, a world that you know because you were in it earlier, and one that's had a go at you on occasion in the past.
Yes, and been supportive on occasion, but it's the have-a-goes you remember. And the problem at the moment, Peter Kellner put it very well in an article in Prospect. He said there's almost a production line of scandals, of mini-scandals. He talked about, you know, Churchill and how Churchill manoeuvred and got his friends to pay his bills and, you know, put pressure on the revenue to not tax him so much. You know, he did things, despite being a great Prime Minister, which nowadays would definitely mean that he was no longer Prime
Does it confuse you or anger you that he's vilified now in the way that Cecil Rhodes is vilified, which you might understand given your time in South Africa and colonialism, but that Churchill should be vilified by the same people?
You know, we're applying modern standards to the past.
But not in a terribly bright way,
And not in a very bright way at all. No, because the past is very definitely another country, another time, and people operated differently. And I can understand some of the vilification of Cecil John Rhodes and sympathise with it, but less so with Churchill. There are things that he did, but there are other things that he did as well. Yes. And you have to take his life as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Weaving back to the book and the modern era, we three of us agreed about that intriguing shift from our teen years of Russia and Giles cartoons and the rest of it to a very real and cold China. Tamara, who's another brilliantly crafted character, in my view, a top CIA operative, just a lovely person as well, I think. She observes, the Chinese don't have friends, they have clients and debtors. God, that captures the 21st century relationships, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, you know, Tamara is very bright and very determined and sexy. And, you know, if a woman, where there's a woman hero in one of my books, she tends to be like that, and you can see where I got the idea.
But you did have to remind her that tomorrow is your wedding anniversary.
Yes, I did.
I'm not going to do any more on the book because I've just been told we've only got 4 minutes left. I'm just going to do one other final thing on the book because I just want to know where it came from. I love the fact that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the American equivalent of the Chief of the Defence Staff here in the United Kingdom, is Bill Schneider. I knew Bill Schneider, who was CNN's political editor and commentator all those years ago. Tell me that's not where you got the name from.
No, it's not. It's not. I made it up.
Well, I can tell you there's one guy at CNN who will be very, very pleased if he is still with us. And also the president's daughter saying, don't worry, Mum, the horse keeps you warm. It's like the seat warmer in a car. Final little chunk, you first. What role did Gordon Brown and Ed Balls play? Because you credit them as being consultants. I know Ed's a very close friend.
Yes, Ed's a pal, and we know Gordon, of course, because he was Prime Minister when Barbara was a government minister. Gordon was great. I asked him if I could interview him, and he was terrific. He came to the house. And of all the people I interviewed for this book, he was the only one who had ever actually had the power to start World War III. And I said to him, as you know, people don't always answer your questions. So I said to Gordon, what was it like to have that power? And he didn't answer the question. You know, Gordon doesn't open his heart to you very easily. He gave me lots of great factual information and some other people to talk to. And the same sort of thing with Ed. You know, they've both been very high. Ed had been high in government. Yeah. Ed Balls was high in government as well. And
Ed, of course, knows America intimately, having studied there.
Very well, yeah. So, I mean, they both... I would try out ideas on them and they would both say, yes, that could happen, no, that couldn't happen. And they were both terrifically helpful.
Oh, brilliant. I'm intrigued because I admire Gordon, didn't know him as well as you do. I know Ed very well and I'm a big, big fan, although he's slightly more into recipes these days, but watch this space. He's got good stuff coming up as well. Finally, Emily's list, call it what you will, folletting people. I suspect one of your great achievements, Barbara, is getting more women into Parliament, obviously through the Labour Party. I have to ask you a blunt question, how well you think it's going now, where you've got one young female Labour MP who yesterday accused the police of being assassins in certain circumstances, and another who's just got a suspended sentence. She's not now in the Labour Party, she's an independent, but she was a Labour MP who's got a suspended sentence for threatening to throw acid over the face of somebody. I mean, some of them, frankly, are not up to Barbara Follett muster, are they?
I would say that that's true of all politicians, of all parties. They're not up to, you know, many people come into Parliament of many abilities. But I think of Jo Cox, who headed up Labour Women's Network after me.
Yes.
And I encouraged her to stand for Batley and Spen. And I still feel a twinge whenever I think of her death, because there was someone who really could have made, and did make a difference, but could have made an even bigger difference. I think many MPs, again, David Amos, who wasn't of my
and James Brokenshire, if I may.
And James
Brokenshire. Chum, a good man.
Both very good men.
Yeah.
And it's tragic what happened to David. I knew him as a friend in the Commons, but, although not a colleague in the party. We both like dogs. So we often had Westminster Dog of the Year. But he was a very compassionate man. And what I don't like about what's happening in politics at the moment is that the value that individual MPs and parties give is being lost in this sort of constant trashing of democracy and of the people who give up a lot to be in the House.
Sure. Trevor Kavanagh on this programme earlier said Johnson seems to just get away with everything, partly because Starmer isn't up to the job of challenging him and nailing him to the wall.
I think Starmer's still on a learning curve.
Been a long old time.
It has been a longer time. I don't know him at all. I've never met him. But I think the old adage that it's governments that lose elections, not oppositions that win them, might help us here. I'm not saying that's how it should be. That's not how it was in '97. We were ready for government and swept in. I don't.
But that's because a number of mutual friends like Charles Clarke and John Reid had worked so hard with Neil Kinnock
and Gordon Brown.
Absolutely. The final minute or so. This is about a change in world order. I said yesterday on the programme that if I submitted the events of the last 48 hours to a publisher as a political thriller, it would be rejected as nonsense. Does it look to you to be nonsense, or are we on the brink of something pretty profound, both for the Labour Party and for the Tories?
And 5 years ago, if you had proposed a novel about a real maniac becoming president of the United States, the publisher would have said, this isn't realistic enough, Ken. And then it happened. So, yes, it's sort of gone beyond. There was a time when I felt I knew what the options were in politics, you know. I knew what, and it was left and right, and I was left of centre, and I knew where I was. And now I'm at a bit of a loss, to be honest, as it were, to navigate politics today.
I look forward to the book. It's been a real joy and a pleasure to see both of you, and good luck with a really superb book. It is called Never, and it's out tomorrow. Barbara and Ken Follett. I could have continued that conversation all day, but I've been told very firmly I can't. I will, however, be back next Saturday at midday, where we'll be covering all of the stories that matter most to you. So thanks for being with us. Have a terrific Sunday afternoon. Bye-bye.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.